Okay, I think we got all the corpses and all the synthetic parts from whatever happened on the fucking ship all piled up into the airlock. So let's just open the doors and blast that shit out of here.
Okay. Hold on to something, Cooler Bot.
Hydration is important.
Yeah, it is. Okay, that's much better. The ship is nice and clean now, except for all these acid burns and bullet holes.
Yeah, for sure.
But we should probably head up to the cockpit and see where this bucket of bolts is headed.
For sure.
Come on, Cooler Bot.
Bleed loop H2O.
Okay, let's see if we can get these thrusters going. Okay, that ought to do it. Captain Kinney, what's our course?
You've got to be fucking kidding me. Looks like we're heading back to Kalpamos, folks.
Again, is that the only goddamn system out there? See if you can switch it to manual controls. I don't want to go back there.
Well, here's the thing, Neal. I tried, and it looks like whatever battle happened here did some major fucking damage to the navigation system. And so now we're stuck on autopilot. It says here the destination is, well, once again, it's Hadley's Hope.
God damn it. Where is Engineer Carissa when you need her? She could probably fix this system up. Why? What more could there be for us to check out on LV-426? Like, it's not like things have changed since last time, right?
For sure.
What, are we going to suddenly discover that there was a Colonial Marine unit there the whole time on Hadley's Hope? Or like a series of atmospheric processors, not just like the one atmospheric processor?
Well, one thing we surely won't discover evidence of is that in addition to the Onager, there was, I don't know, maybe like a Weyland-Yutani escape ship hidden within the colony, enabling survivors to escape the catastrophe and flee into deep space.
Yeah, I mean, that just wouldn't make any fucking sense. We're definitely not going to discover that.
I'm inclined to agree. There's definitely no way that's going to happen.
What do you think, Cooler Bot?
Time to hydrate and refresh.
Boy, these intros are getting dumb.
They sure are. Ever since we discovered Coolerbot last episode, they've gotten increasingly stupider as time has gone on.
I got good news for you, crew. Coolerbot has decided to join our ranks as the official third co-host of Crew Expendable. Expect to hear a lot more from Coolerbot over the next, I don't know. I'm going to give it 5 or 6 episodes before we kind of get tired of the bit.
Would you like some water?
All right, settle down, Coolerbot, okay? You're making more editing work for me. Welcome.
It's a good bit, and I haven't gotten tired of it yet, all right?
Okay, that's fair. Welcome to Crew Expendable. I am professional Burning Gods esports athlete Hallstrom.
And I am a professional Cubics player Rohrbacher.
Nice. We both went with a game. That's fun.
Well, you want to know a secret? We both went with a game because I completely forgot to give myself a designation, and so I pulled that out of my ass real quick.
There we go. And we are just a couple of freelance surveyors mapping the terrain of the Alien franchise and universe, I suppose.
Voila. I'm chef kissing right now. Mwah.
And
that was good.
We have an announcement. I didn't prepare you for this, Kenny, but that's okay. You know what's going on.
You sure didn't. I don't actually know what's about to be announced.
Yes,
so.
you do. We are now putting the podcast out on YouTube.
Oh, okay. I thought it was a different announcement than that. Okay.
Nope, that's it. It's the YouTube announcement.
Okay. Got it. Yes.
Yeah, you can find our podcast now on YouTube, and whatever this weird new YouTube music podcast thing that they're doing is, because they're just reinventing the fucking wheel over there at YouTube for no reason at all.
They sure are.
But our channel is youtube.com/@crewexpendable. We got it. We got Crew Expendable on YouTube somehow.
Somehow, yeah.
And I should say that our back catalog is being added kind of a few episodes a week until we get caught up. I don't want to like crazy overload the subscribers with notifications. But once that's all current with whatever episode we're on, it'll be day and date, I think, the YouTube version and the standard audio podcast version. So they're just the audio version on YouTube with a graphic. So
They sure are.
but a lot of people do seem to listen to podcasts on YouTube. I think the thing that I've heard is that some people can get YouTube on their computers at work, right? But can't really access other things. So, hey, if you're one of those people, if you're one of those YouTube music subscribers, good news. And basically what we really want is anyone who's listening to just go over there and subscribe to the podcast. We'll put a link in the show notes here. And there's also a link on the website, crewexpendable.net. There's a new link to find our YouTube channel. So we would really appreciate it if you guys would subscribe. I will say, don't smash that bell, right? Because you'll be getting a shit ton of notifications as I catch up with the episodes.
For sure.
Yeah, and that'll be annoying. And I don't want to annoy you guys. I love you guys, all of you, everyone out
you
there.
listen to the show.
Yeah, but today on the audio podcast, on the standard in your podcast app podcast, we are talking Alien River of Pain.
We sure are.
Yeah, the novel I always want to call Sea of Sorrows, but that's the other book in this trilogy.
It sure is. River of Pain is a 2014 novel, and it is part 3 of what is retroactively been dubbed the Shadow Trilogy.
That's right. We already covered Alien Out of the Shadows, a novel that takes place between Alien and Aliens and features Ellen Ripley through a plot device that just barely works. I'll just say that.
I don't know if it's on this side of works, but I'll give you that. Fine.
Sure.
It's fine.
The second novel, Alien Sea of Sorrows, takes place in the far future, I believe sometime after Alien Resurrection, correct?
It's a sequel to Resurrection in that it involves a couple of plot points from that, but it takes place like 100 or 200 years after Resurrection.
Right.
So it's like several hundred years in the future.
And both of those novels take place on LV, is it 187 or is it 178? I think it's 187.
Yes. Maybe. I don't remember actually.
I can find out in just a second here, and all of this is
but they both take place on
staying in
the
the
same
podcast.
planet.
It is LV 178.
All right.
LV 187 would be the murder planet, right? Isn't that what a 187 is?
I think so, yeah.
And yeah, this is the third one in that trilogy, but it takes place again, technically between Alien and Aliens, but more the beginning part of Aliens, right?
It does technically take place between the two of them because this takes place like a week before the events it doesn't take place a week before the events of Aliens the movie. It takes place like, I don't know, like 2 months or something before.
Right.
But it takes place like a week before the events dictated in Aliens starts.
Right.
I'll put it that way.
There's some overlap, right? We get to see Ellen Ripley on Gateway Station like we did in the movie, right?
Basically, the gist is for anyone that has seen Aliens recently, you might remember that the beginning of the movie is us finding out after the fact that the colony of Hadley's Hope has been overrun by xenomorphs.
Right.
This novel is the story of Hadley's Hope getting overrun by xenomorphs.
I think run over is accurate also. Familiar territory if you've listened to our episode on Newt's Tale.
For sure.
We should say this book was written by Christopher Golden, and there is an audio drama adaptation directed by Dirk Maggs, same guy who directed the Out of the Shadows audio drama. And that's the version that I listened to. Kenny, you listened to the unabridged audiobook, correct?
I sure did. I actually listened I took this story in through a combination of the unabridged audiobook and the ebook.
Gotcha.
So I listened to part of it and read part of it.
Gotcha. And the audiobook was narrated by Jeff Harding. Credit where credit's due.
It sure was.
Now, if you're an Audible subscriber, this is not a sponsored plug, right? But I'm an Audible user, and both the unabridged audiobook and the audio drama are available just included in your membership. So you don't have to like burn credits on these if you want to listen to them for yourself. It's kind of nice. There's a lot of Alien content on Audible that is just available with your membership. Not all of it, obviously, but quite a bit of it. So if you're an Alien fan, check it out. Use promo code CoolerBot for 1 month free. We are not sponsored by Audible.
If you try to use that coupon code, it will not work, folks.
I do want to say, between like Comixology and Audible, this show is so reliant on services now owned by Amazon. It kind of feels like we're in bed with Wayland Yutani. Like I have I have the occasional small crisis of conscience over it.
Well, feel free to cut this out, but I'm not as worried about that because pretty much everything we've covered on the show that isn't a movie, I've pirated. So
yeah, you do what you got to do. I'm making sure the creators are getting paid. Anyway, should we dive into this bad boy, this rehash of events that we've seen in Newt's Tale and in Aliens Special Edition, with some enhancements, I'll call it?
Some expansions.
Sure, that's maybe a better term.
I mean, some of them are cool. Some of the stuff they added is not as cool, but that's fine.
I'm going to crack this Monster Energy Zero.
Ooh, nice.
For those
that was a good crack.
Keeping count, this is, of course, my second one of the day.
I am drinking a bottle of peach tea.
Nice. I almost got the peach monster. We would have matched, but I had one of those yesterday, so I went with the orange. I was going to drink the green one, but I drank the green one earlier, so.
Fair enough.
The green one.
That's right. Capital TGO.
Look, I want to start this off with some general thoughts, Kenny. I've listened to this audio drama before a couple of times, right? And when it first came out in, I think, 2017, I kind of credit it with helping me get back into the Alien fold, so to speak. Like this one and Out of the Shadows. Out of the Shadows more so than this one, but I was happy when this one came along also. I'm one of those people who, like, I just listen to stuff all the time, right? Obviously, podcasts, audiobooks, audio dramas. My job allows me to basically listen to things all day long, right?
Mine does too.
I don't have a job in front of a computer.
Neither do I. I hear you.
Couple of wildcatters, you and me.
You know it, baby.
People I think have called us the Curtis and Otto of Alien podcasts.
Oh man, that's not good.
We have definitely.
I'm not sure if I'm okay with that.
As the Curtis and Otto. What's their last name? I dropped it. The Finch. We are the Finch brothers of Alien.
Yeah, they're the
podcasts.
Finch brothers. Yes, that's correct.
So, to the point, this River of Pain audio drama is a very fun listen, right? It's fun to be able to listen to an Alien story with sound effects and casting and all of that kind of stuff. But as a story, I'm not crazy about this thing. It's doing so much work. This trilogy altogether, like in retrospect, Out of the Shadows and this, I can't speak to Sea of Sorrows, given that that's placed so far in the future, right? But these two books, Out of the Shadows, and more so this one, because of the existence of Out of the Shadows, seems to be doing just an insane amount of retconning to make it fit into continuity. And
it sure is.
It just doesn't flow right for me, right? That's not to say you shouldn't give it a listen, and if you're a fan of it, like, more power to you. Again, I enjoyed it. It's a fun listen, but going through it this time, there was just a lot of stuff like that really jumped out at me that just didn't quite work at the end of the day.
All right.
How do you feel about this story, retconning certain events and things like that?
My main issue with all that stuff is that by retconning like the situation around what happened at Hadley's Hope, they decided the best way to retcon / expand those events
Yeah.
was to basically say, oh, the events of Aliens actually effectively happened twice over the course of like 2 months.
Okay.
Like it just, the events just happened again, but slightly differently. And I was like, I don't care. Like we already saw these things happen in the movie. I
Right.
don't need to have them happen a second time.
Sure. That's understandable. Right.
And like my point in saying that though is that like I don't have any problem with the events of this. Like, you're like, a lot of it doesn't really make sense or whatever. And it's like, I mean, yeah, a lot of it kind of doesn't make sense. A lot of it might be a retcon in some way, but it's like the book just feels at its core inessential because it's telling us a story that we already knew.
Yeah, inessential,
And-
that's the word for sure.
And so there's a lot more here because like, what it's doing is it's expanding on what we heard happened to Hadley's Hope at the beginning of Aliens.
Right.
And so this story tells us that, but gives us a lot more information that we didn't know from when we first heard about it.
Yeah.
But like none of that new stuff really affects anything except for the people that survive at the end of the novel, because spoiler alert, there are actually a handful of survivors.
There are.
And the fact that there were is like the one thing about all the new stuff they introduced that makes me go, now wait a minute.
Yeah, I didn't like that either, especially because as far as I know, that stuff, we never pick up again with those survivors, do we?
As far as I know, we never hear from any of them again. I think this is the only book they ever appear in.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the article for Demian Brackett again on our favorite website, the avp.fandom.com Xenopedia.
You know it, baby.
Also not sponsored content, but I feel good about checking in with them. I feel good about plugging that one versus the other one.
Or like I'm looking at it right here, one of the other survivors, this is the only book they ever appeared in.
Right.
Demian
Brackett does apparently get mentioned in the fictional technical guide, Alien, the Weyland-Yutani Report. It's not like a storybook, but apparently he's in there. The other thing that was kind of weird about this was the shoehorned in reference to the Onager and the events of Fire and Stone, right?
Yeah, that felt really weird because it never fucking went anywhere.
Sure, I don't know how it is in the main book, if the characters got cut down or something for the audio drama, but in the audio drama, it's literally just, hey, where are those other people that are on this colony too? Oh, I think they're going to see if they can get the Onager ready for evacuation. And that was it. That was the whole mention of them.
That does happen in the audiobook, but those characters had been mentioned a handful of times earlier on in the book before that.
Okay. And those characters are, it was Kale.
It is Genevieve Dione,
Dione,
Derek Russell, and Nolan Kale.
Yeah. I'm looking at the cast list for the audio drama. None of them were voiced. So they may have been just like mentioned in passing. Right.
Yeah, I assume because like in the book, there are scenes where I know that for a fact there's at least 1 or 2 scenes where Derek Russell speaks. And I think there's one scene where Anne and Genevieve have a conversation. But other than like, there's like a scene where Anne sees the 3 of them off in a corner discussing something privately with each other, but you don't hear what they're discussing. And I think that is the only time we ever actually see Kale on screen. But the other 2 have lines in at least some point in the book.
Interesting. Well, I do applaud the continuity between the book and Fire and Stone, right? I think that's a slick thing that they didn't have to do, but they did, Not that any of it matters anymore, because I don't think any of this stuff is considered canon, right? But
I mean, I don't know if this novel is or not, but I can't imagine the comic still is.
Surely it's not, you know. I mean, we'll see where Marvel goes with things, right?
Yeah,
They
for
got
sure.
they had pathogen all over that last story arc. It was just dripping with it. Yeah.
Sure was.
Anyway, I think I lost my point here. So let's just talk.
Yeah, let's just get into it
Let's
then.
just get into this motherfucker. Now, I know right away the opening of the book is different than the audio book. And can you tell me how the book opens? Sorry. The opening of the book is different from the audio drama. There we go.
The opening scene of the novel is a flashback to a moment during the events of Alien.
Okay.
And at this point in the story, Kane already has the face hugger on him. They've already found out that the face hugger has acid blood, but Kane is like still has the face hugger on him, still unconscious, still hasn't woken up yet. So it's like
Gotcha.
while he's, unconscious.
Okay.
And the scene is Ripley getting super pissed off and going to confront Ash about, as it says in my notes, she goes to confront Ash about, quote, what the fuck, letting Kane on board.
Gotcha. Ash, of course, also a character in Out of the Shadows.
And he actually pops up. I don't want to say he pops up, but he is referenced a few other times over the course of this book.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's basically the premise of it is she goes to like confront him for being like, look, I outrank you when Kane and Dallas aren't on the ship, and why the fuck did you let them in? And he's like, I was given a direct order. And she's like, but not from me. And he basically just blows her off, and then she gets mad and storms away.
Okay. Interesting. That happened in the movie, right?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I seem to remember there being some version of a confrontation between them in the science lab.
Yes.
So that's why I didn't really take a whole lot of notes, because I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is a scene that was in the movie.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure it is. From there, I guess we pop into LV-426 several years later.
Yeah.
Where we learn that the planet is now being called Acheron, and we learn what Acheron is a reference to. I gotta say, the PR department for Weyland-Yutani colonization, fucking idiots, right? We're gonna name this planet Acheron, and they say it's because it's been named Acheron. The guy's working on this engineer effort to like establish these atmosphere processors, these temporary ones, right?
Yeah. Yep.
That colonists want to move to places with names, not numbers, right?
That's what they say.
But we learned that Acheron is like one of the rivers of the dead, right? In Hades in Greek mythology.
Yeah, they were literally like, people would rather move to a place that has an actual name rather than a series of numbers.
Yeah.
So we're going to call this place Hell World. Everyone move on in.
Let's do it. Yeah, the translation of Acheron is apparently river of pain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what the fuck, right? Now, it's interesting the Greek, right? The Greek mythology reference, because wasn't that stuff all over the ships in Prometheus, Fire and Stone also? And of course, I guess the Prometheus as well, right?
It sure was.
Yeah. So interesting themes we have going on here, but it's getting to the point where it feels like they're just referencing, it's more about the reference than it is about the reality of people wanting to live on a moon called River of Pain, right?
I mean, I don't think that's a particularly appealing name, but that's just me, you know?
I could probably be talked into it, honestly. I mean, like, what kind of pain are we talking about? You know what I'm saying? But
we also find out that the reason the colony is called Hadley's Hope, there isn't really like a reason, but it is a reference because one of the designers of the colony was apparently named Hadley, and so they named it after him.
Nice. And we also learn very quickly in that on Hadley's Hope on March 15th, 2173, Rebecca Jordan, a.k.a. Newt, was born and is the first child born on the colony.
Yeah, Nothing really happens in this scene. It just depicts the birth of Newt. But
Right.
I don't want to say surprisingly a lot of things to say about it, but what's surprising about it to me is that I didn't have nothing to say. I actually did have a couple of things I wanted to say about the scene.
Sure.
First off, she was born on the Ides of March, which is really funny to me.
Oh, Jesus Christ. All right. You're right. March 15th.
Yeah.
My God.
March 15th. Yeah. She was born on the Ides of March. And also I never thought we'd have an alien book that mentioned a cervix multiple times.
Sure. But hey, I'm glad we do. Right.
And like you said, she's the first baby born on Acheron. The other thing, though, that I thought was really funny is that at some point near the end of the scene, because we have like her birth scene and then it cuts to like a couple of weeks later and they're having like, a colony get together and like everyone's gathering around to like coo around baby Newt and all that.
Sure.
And one of the like administrative people, it might even be like the leader, Al Simpson, it might even be him. He says something to the effect of, mark my words, the Jordans are gonna be this reason the colony has problems. And I was sitting there reading it going, yeah, thanks man, I saw the movie too, don't worry. I get the foreshadowing, you don't need to lay it on this thick. All right,
it's not even is foreshadowing even accurate there? It's like he's beating, like he's stamping it into your head. Right. Like, I don't know. That's not a good comparison, but yeah, there's a lot of that in this, man. I'm being,
there's a lot of really obvious and heavy-handed foreshadowing in this book to the events of Aliens. And it's like, bro, everyone that's reading this book has already seen the movie. We're going to get the references without you pointing them out to us. We got it. Don't worry.
Could you imagine the insufferable fan out there who's like wants to get his partner? I'm going to say his partner because let's be real, right? This is a thing that guys do. Who wants to get his partner into the Alien franchise, and he's like, okay, all right. We have to watch Alien, and now I need you to read Out of the Shadows and River of Pain, and then you can watch Aliens the movie, right? Just like the demanding, like, no, we have to stick to continuity, and you need to read these things in order. I don't know. I'm mad at this imaginary person, but
you invented a guy just to get mad at him. Good work.
Sure, I invented a guy, but here's the thing: there was a time in my life where I probably would have been that guy.
Well, see, and here's the thing. You invented a guy, but like you invented a specific guy for the purposes of our conversation.
Yeah.
But you didn't have to invent a type of guy because those type of guys are real and exist and are actually out there.
And there was a time probably around 2017 when this audio drama came out where I was like, you should really, I should experience. I probably did. I probably watched Alien and then spent like 2 days listening to the Out of the Shadows and this, and then watched Aliens just to like get it all in the right order, like there's people out there who are like watching the entire MCU in chronological order. Like, my God.
when I still gave a shit about the MCU, or really when I still gave a shit about comic books, I considered doing that with all of the MCU TV shows.
Woof.
Because like, the Netflix ones and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all that. And I got like a season and a half through it. And I was like, I don't give a shit. And so I just stopped.
I tried to do it with Star Wars. I'm not going to lie. I tried to watch all of Star Wars in order, including like the cartoons. Right.
Oh, because Star Wars is actually another franchise that I recently-ish stopped caring about with the MCU. But when I would watch Star Wars movies, I only ever watched them in chronological order. Now admittedly, I only watched the movies. I didn't do the TV shows and the spin-offs and stuff. Yeah. But I would watch 1 through 9, and I would watch Solo, and I would watch Rogue One, but I would watch them all in chronological order. Like every time I sat down to watch Star Wars, I would always only ever do it in chronological order.
Gotcha. Yeah, I planned to do it because I was like, I've never watched the Clone Wars series, right? Mm-hmm. I never watched Rebels, and I was like, well, maybe I'll like those shows. Maybe I should watch them in the context of all of the everything. Bad idea. I think I got I watched episode 1 episode 2, the Clone Wars animated movie, and maybe like 3 episodes of the show. And I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I can't do this. This is too much. I'm not, this is a huge, huge commitment. And then I just stopped, full stop. And then I feel like we're making fun of people. First of all, if you love the MCU, I'm happy for you.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem at all with people out there still liking Star Wars or liking the MCU. It's like, I mean, there's a reason why people like it. And like I said, up until recently, I was invested in them too. I just decided that there were other things I'd rather do with my time than keep up with a like 35 movie franchise or whatever.
Right.
I didn't feel like spending that time. Well, really what did it is I didn't want to start watching the TV shows.
Sure.
And then when they started making movies that were like sequels to the TV shows, that's when I was like, all right, I'm out.
Right. And let's be clear, like this behavior is the exact same thing that you and I are doing with the Alien franchise, right?
That is correct.
Trying to watch and read and listen to all of it. So like, yeah,
like you said, there's nothing wrong with liking the MCU because we're doing exactly the same thing with this franchise, so it's fine.
We've got that obsessive, nerd thing going on, and I have it for several other things too. But we won't divert. We're diverging quite a bit off the path because I'm worried I upset our audience. I do feel like,
for sure,
like there's definitely a huge overlap in the Venn diagram, right? So just to be clear, we're not shitting on Star Wars or the MCU. We just have we just have a lot of alien stuff that we have to digest.
Yeah, bro, when I say that I finally gave up on like Star Wars and the MCU, Star Wars I gave up on when episode 9 came out because I watched that movie and went, haha, what?
Right.
But the MCU, I only gave up on it like within the last year is when I stopped keeping up to date on it.
Gotcha.
So, I mean, like up until extremely recently, I did do this with the MCU as well. So it's fine. Like I said, no hate, no complaints, because I, until very recently, was also doing that. So it's fine.
Yeah, and I'm trying to read every issue of Gen 13, so there we are.
There you go.
Anyway. All right.
But yeah. Next up in the book is let's see. Ripley gets found. Brackett arrives on the planet.
Yes, we got to talk about that. That's a huge thing. But
there was one or two things I wanted to say about this. Specifically, during the part where Brackett shows up, we find out that he has. How should I put this? He is extremely attracted to the pilot that brings him in.
Okay, that didn't translate in the audio drama. They were a little friendly and flirtatious, but
he's brought in by a pilot named Tressa.
Yes,
and we know exactly 2 things about Tressa.
Oh boy,
she's a very good pilot. And he thinks she is extremely Babe City.
Babe City. Is that in the book? Is that text in the book? I hope it is.
No, that's editorializing on my part.
That's a Kenny original. Okay, I dig it.
But yeah, the reason I bring this up is because later on in the book, we find out that his only other major relationship after, spoiler alert, he used to date Anne.
Sure,
but
Anne Jordan. Yeah,
and Jordan, Newt's mom. But yeah, we find that out later. But like the reason I bring this up about Tressa is because late in the book, he's reminiscing about how like the only other major relationship he's had after him and Anne broke up was he dated this woman who I wrote her name down in my notes, but I cannot find it in my notes right now this second. Okay. But she was also a pilot. So I guess he has a thing for pilots.
Nice. This is interesting. I believe that there is a scene here that was in the audio drama, but not in the novel.
All right.
And it was at the birth, at the sort of colony celebration of Newt's birth. There is also a ship brought in, I believe also piloted by Tressa. And again, this is, years prior to Damian Brackett arriving, where 3 Weyland-Yutani scientists or doctors are brought into the colony and sort of like set up shop.
All right.
Was
Well,
I know they're present in the novel, but
as I mentioned, that colony celebration you mentioned is
Yes.
in the book, but the arrival of the three scientists we do not see that.
okay. Well, let's just talk about who these scientists are. There is Dr. Hidalgo, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's Dr. Mori and Dr. Reese, right?
Correct.
Dr. Hidalgo's a lady, and Dr. Mori and Reese are a couple of blokes.
Hidalgo is extremely tall and thin and lanky.
Okay.
Reese is described as looking like a normal, regular old guy scientist.
Sure.
Except he has like a big wine color birthmark on like his neck jaw area.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And Dr. Mori is an older Japanese guy that extremely hilariously in the audiobook, Jeff Harding gives him a German accent.
Oh boy.
Yeah, Dr. Mori is explicitly described as Japanese, but he has a German accent in the audiobook, which is very funny to me.
You know, it's space, right?
I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, he might be like, genetically Japanese, but was
Right.
just born and raised in Germany. I
Sure.
mean, I didn't really think anything of it until after the fact. And I was like, that is kind of a weird, like, editorial choice,
It
but
is
sure, whatever.
Interesting. So we learn in this scene in the audio drama that the excuse that Wayland has for parking their science team here is that it takes 2 weeks for messages to get back to Earth from Hadley's Hope. And then, you know, I don't know if it's 2 weeks one way or if it's 2 weeks round trip, right? Like to send a message and get a response.
Well, later on, Brackett mentions that because, a minor plot point over the course of this book is that he has to send a message to his superiors at one point.
Right.
And he says that it'll take a week, but he doesn't specify if it'll take a week to receive a response back or to send it. He never says either way, so I don't actually know.
Yeah, I think we can assume that it's a 2 week round trip situation. They probably got people ready to respond to messages with that much of a delay. So Dr. Hidalgo explains like, well, it takes 2 weeks to get information back to Wayland and then receive a response. So they decided it was just a better idea to have us here locally to inspect samples and things right as they come in, right? Because Wayland Yutani's interested in surveying this planet for what we know why, right?
Mm-hmm.
Looking for some goddamn xenomorphs.
They sure are.
But the excuses are like trimonite deposits and things like that, the same kind of shit we heard in Out of the Shadows.
All right.
I heard trimonite a dozen times in this book, and I was like, I get it. This is in continuity with Out of the Shadows. Chill.
Well, I can tell you right now, the word trimonite never gets said a single lone solitary time in the actual novel.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah, this book was doing a lot of heavy lifting trying to connect Out of the Shadows to things. We'll get more into that.
Speaking of it trying to connect to Out of the Shadows, actually, that segues perfectly into what I was going to say next.
Sure.
There's something that happens here that I was forced to assume is a reference to Out of the Shadows, even though it's never called out.
Okay.
During the scene where, because they even show it, it's in the movie, but we see it, it's like it's depicted again, seeing it happen in the book.
Yeah.
When Ripley finds out it's been 57 years and she has that freak out and everything.
Yes.
While like during that scene, because, during that part, she's like in the med bay and she's like drifting in and out of consciousness all the time.
Yes.
She keeps having these like visions of the rest of the crew of the Nostromo, but they're like, she sees them in her mind's eye, but they're so far away and she can't reach them and she can't get to them. And no matter how much she calls out to them, they can't hear her because they're so far away. But then sometimes they'll fade away and then Ash will appear in her memory.
Okay.
But Ash is like a lot closer to her in her visions, almost close enough that she can reach out and touch him. And I was like, that's gotta be her brain vaguely remembering the events of Out of the Shadows,
Yeah.
because her crew wasn't around anymore, but like Ash was there with her while it was going on.
I'm,
And I was like,
I'm sure
that's
it
got to be an
was.
Out of the Shadows reference, but like it never gets brought up again, and she never does figure out what those visions or dreams are really supposed to mean. So it never comes up again, but I was like, that's got to be a fucking Out of the Shadows reference, baby.
I think so. There's a couple other ones I can think of. Let's hit those, and then I want to talk about Damien Brackett a little bit more.
All right.
Another, I believe it's actually in the opening scene where the guys are working on the atmosphere processor and they're dealing with a fissure opening up underneath it and that kind of stuff. And this is one of the sub processors, I believe. I think
I don't think they actually give that one a name because they abandon it before it's complete. So I
Right.
don't think it ever actually goes online. So I don't
Yes.
think they ever give it a number. or
I
anything.
believe one of those workers mentions that they have a brother who was working on the Marion.
Ah,
Yeah.
that is not a reference that's in the novel.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
apparently one of the changes they added to the drama. That's fun.
Yeah, I think it's in that opening scene. I'm not positive it's there somewhere else, and I'm not sure how the timeline works out because we're like 20 years past the events of Out of the Shadows at this point. Right.
We're not quite that far away. I actually wrote it down. That scene takes place 43 years after the opening scene, which, if you recall, was during the events of Alien. So that scene with the Atmo processors takes place on 2165, which
Okay.
is 6 years after Out of the Shadows.
Okay, well that makes more sense.
Because Out of the Shadows takes place 20 years before Aliens, so it takes place in
Gotcha.
2159.
Okay, the timeline's a little wonky maybe because the other, well, I guess that tracks. That just happened significantly, like more years before Newt was born than I thought. But the other reference to Out of the Shadows I remember is the boardroom. I'll call it the boardroom scene when Ripley is being cross-examined by Wayland Yutani about the incident investigation or whatever.
Uh-huh.
And one of them mentions like, it's when Van Leeuwen is saying like, the flight report confirms some aspects of your story. He then like interjects this part like, it does say that you dumped part of your, that the shuttle dumped part of its cargo about 31 years into your sleep or something like that. And she's like, I don't remember anything about that.
I don't know if that scene happens in the original novel. That might be another one of the changes they made to the audio drama.
Okay. Feels like
I don't remember. I mean, I know that reference exists, but I don't think it happens in the actual novel. I think I vaguely remember seeing it like on a list of differences.
Right.
So.
Okay. Yeah, that's just one of, I mean, I'm sure there's others that I missed, but it did seem like this was very heavily trying to reference the Out of the Shadows audio drama in particular, considering it's the same creative team doing this one, right?
Yeah, I think
makes
think
sense.
the same group of people did all three of them, I think.
Yes. But let's talk about Damien Brackett a little bit.
Or, as he's consistently called in the audiobook, Demian Brackett.
So, yes, you're right. Demian Brackett is Demian with an E.
Yeah.
That's on me, folks. All right. Stop writing your emails. We fixed it.
Well, see, that's the thing. Like me, I was like, it might be spelled with an E, but that doesn't mean his name's not Damien. I was
Right.
like, it's still Damien, even if it's spelled with an E, but he's consistently called Demian throughout the entire book.
Also, shout out to our friend Damien Damaski.
That's right.
Director of Reunion of Champions, available on Amazon Prime Video and maybe Tubi. I'm not sure. Go.
SMH, yet another Amazon plug you're pulling over.
Oh
there.
no! Go watch Damien's movie.
Yeah, go watch it. Seriously.
Damien, I really hope I said your last name properly. This might be the first time I've spoken it out loud.
But you wanted to talk about Brackett.
Yeah, because Damien Brackett is here to become the new commanding officer of the Colonial Marine troops stationed at Hadley's Hope. And folks, there are Colonial Marines stationed at Hadley's Hope.
There sure are.
This is the hardest sell for me in this book, is that all through Aliens, the movie, right? there is no reference to other Marines, right? When they're on the planet in Aliens, we're not seeing Marine gear, right? Like theoretically, like let's think about how rough the Marines had it in Aliens, right? They blew up all their gear. They were super low on ammunition and all of that kind of stuff. They only had a few things they were able to scrape together from the APC wreckage. There was a battalion of Marines stationed on this planet, like they could on this moon, in this colony. They couldn't find like some extra gear and shit like that. There was no knowledge of this. It's just a really fucking hard sell for me that there's Marines here. And I understand they had to do it, right? Because the Colonial Marines are a very popular aspect of this franchise. But it didn't need to be, like, couldn't it have been Weyland-Yutani security officers or something like that, right? Couldn't have been like a different group of security, like not fucking Colonial Marines, I don't know, National Guard or something, right? Some kind of it just doesn't make sense to me. And you add on to that the coincidence that this guy gets assigned to the colony where his ex-girlfriend lives with her husband and children. Like it's a little much to swallow. You know what I mean?
My issue with it was always, like you said, the Colonial Marines are really popular. A lot of people really like them. And I'm sure the primary reason they put them in there is because, hey, the Colonial Marines, they're like from Aliens. So let's toss some more in there because people like them so much. But like the fact that they did invent a battalion of Colonial Marines to be on Hadley's Hope already is precisely what makes this book so unnecessary, because the fact that they're Marines, like I said earlier, just turns this book into Aliens but again.
Yeah.
And like the fact that they're Colonial Marines is like a big part of why this book feels so inessential to me. Because I'm like, if you had made it something other than Marines, that would make it feel different, which would make it feel more necessary to the franchise.
Right. Yeah, it could have been just another I don't know. I think the obvious thing would be to make it some kind of a hired security force.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't know. It just doesn't track. Like
I can't think of a single narrative reason why the group of quote unquote soldiers, like the group of people filling the warrior role,
Yeah.
I can't think of a single narrative reason why those people specifically need to be Colonial Marines in this specific precise story.
Right. It could have been some sort of like frontier militia or something that is and that would have been.
It could have been anything else that filled basically the same role, but they made the one choice that, in my opinion, was a bad choice.
The only reason I think it can work is you need it to be a group of soldiers that is outside of Weyland-Yutani's direct command, so that there can be some conflicts between Weyland-Yutani's mission and the mission of protecting the colonists, right?
And there sure is that.
Yeah, but it didn't have to be, I don't know, it could have just make up something new, right? On the other side of things, I wouldn't have an issue with this and with a battalion of Marines being on a colony if this was a story about a different colony, right? If this was, say, a different colony that was setting up after the events of Aliens, where they're like, yeah, we bring Marines in on these things now after what happened on LV-426, right? Like that makes sense. And if it wasn't Hadley's Hope, a place that was established to not have a Marine presence, suddenly having one, it would be fine. It's just the specifics of like, this was not even hinted at in the movie. This is like the biggest sort of rewriting and retconning, right? There were no Marines in Newt's Tale. Am I correct? It was just sort of.
I don't think there were. And like, that's the thing. It's like, as far as I can recall, there is nothing in Aliens that specifically says there are not Marines in the colony. So it's not a retcon in the sense of they're changing established facts. It's a retcon in the sense of they never said there were or there weren't either way, but it's one of those things where if there had been Marines on there, you'd think we would have heard about it when they were talking about that in the movie.
You would
Nope.
have, because isn't part of this storyline here, especially with Demi and Brackett, that the Marines never leave a man behind, right?
That is correct.
So it seems like sending in another team of Marines, part of their, like, they wouldn't just be like, oh, there's some colonists we got to rescue. It'd be like, we've got men out there, we've got men and women, we've got Marines out there that we need to bring home. Like, that would be a part of the mission. And then I think there'd be a lot less cracking of jokes on the USS Sulaco during the mission briefing. If they were like, this is...
it's like, that's the thing. It's like, there's nothing that specifically says this plot hook isn't possible. It's just, it does a lot of other things that means that this plot hook doesn't make a lot of sense if it is possible.
Right.
That's why we just kind of assumed it wasn't until this book told us it was. You know?
It doesn't work for me. And again, the fact that he was Ann Jordan's like previous relationship before she met Russell is just... It's a huge coincidence, but it's also one that ultimately doesn't really end up being important to the story. So it was one of those things where I was like, that's a leap, but whatever. It doesn't really, end up mattering at all. So I was just able to let that slide, I guess. I do want to give a shout out to the actor who voices Demian Brackett,
all right.
Colin Salmon, who is in 2004's Alien versus Predator. He's
nice.
Maxwell Stafford in that. He's the head of the troops in Resident Evil, the first Resident Evil movie.
All right.
He was on Arrow. Looks like he was on Krypton, a show I tried to watch, but Jesus fucking Christ. Yeah, he's one of those that guys, right? And he's got a hell of a voice. Yeah. Very cool that they pulled someone from an Alien movie to also be a voice in this. There's a few other voices I want to touch on as well when we get there. Certain characters, because some people from the movie Aliens reprise their roles.
Big spoiler alert. The last chapter or so of the book catches up to the immediate preceding events of when Aliens happens.
Right.
So the squad of Marines in the movie has an extended cameo in the final chapter of this book.
Yeah, none of them really reprise their roles. I'm going to run through it now. Mac McDonald, who played Al Simpson in Aliens in the special edition, you can see him. He voices Al Simpson in this.
Oh, nice. That's fun.
I don't know which character is Jernigan. I believe that's maybe the person who's talking to him in his scenes in Aliens.
Maybe, I don't know who that is either.
Voiced by Stuart Milligan, who also played him in the movie. And there's a med tech, Alibi Parsons. I believe that's the med tech looking after Ripley.
Okay.
She voices herself in those scenes also.
I don't think that character was ever actually given a name in the novel, so cool.
Yep, just med tech. And here's a big one. William Hope, a.k.a. Lieutenant Gorman, voices Lieutenant Gorman in this.
Nice.
That's pretty cool. That guy also did some voices. Oh, he was Waits in Alien Isolation, the video game, and Groves in the 2010 Aliens versus Predator.
Oh, dang. He's been around. All right.
And he narrated the audiobook versions of Aliens and Alien Resurrection in 2015. He's really, really active in the Alien franchise outside of just being Lieutenant Gorman in Aliens. Shout out to William Hope. Come on the show. We'd love to talk to you. Anyway, let's get back into talking about the nonsense that's happening on LV 426. Sorry, Hadley's Hope.
All right. Well, there's some stuff where we got a pair. I was going to say a pair of brothers, but I guess it would be brothers. That we referenced earlier.
Otto and Curtis Finch, often called
Otto and Curtis Finch,
often called the Hallstrom and Rohrbacher of the Aliens stories.
They sure are, and they are going out to basically scrounge around and look around inside of. I don't think they're going to the processor, but they're going somewhere and they get caught in a storm, and so they have to take shelter in a processor.
Right. They're on a survey mission. They're freelance survey. They're part of the survey crew, much like Russ Jordan and Ann Jordan. Right.
And the processor turns out is about to explode. And when Curtis climbs up a ladder to try to fix it, there's an earthquake and he falls off and breaks his leg and hits his head really bad and falls unconscious. And then after that, Otto goes insane. Like literally,
Okay.
actually, like his mind breaks and he goes like actually psychotic.
It's really funny. Did they have a Marine escort in the book?
They did.
And
It
it's-
was Draper and Yusef, I
Yes.
believe.
Sergeant Draper, who has kind of been the guy in charge since they've been missing a CO, right?
Yeah.
And Sergeant Yusuf.
Yep.
Yeah. And Otto goes crazy like in the crawler still in the audio version. All he keeps saying is, I want off. I want off.
Well, he's doing that, yes, but like when they get to the processor and like Curtis falls unconscious, Otto like thinks he dies, and
Right.
that's what like pushes him over the edge and makes him go crazy. And as we find out later, he actually ends up pulling a gun and holding Yusef hostage
Yes.
because he's literally just completely gone by this point.
Right. And my designation was almost guy who wants off Hallstrom.
That's a good one.
But I went with Timmy's video game instead. Yeah, so this is immediately Colonel Commanding Officer Brackett's Captain Brackett.
Captain, yeah.
Captain Brackett's like first day, and he's learned that the Weyland-Yutani science team and all of the surveyors have been taking Marine escorts out on these surveying missions, and he's not happy about that. And one of them
definitely doesn't love that for sure. Yeah.
Sure, because he's like, you're using my men as free labor and free access to free equipment, and like that's not part of my assignment here, you know. But before he really gets a chance to like fight with that, he's got to go out and take a team of Marines out to solve this situation, this hostage situation, in a sub processor, an atmospheric sub processor number 6. Is that right?
Number 6, processor 6. That's the one.
Yeah, where there's a Marine being held hostage.
Also of note, just very briefly as a side note, while he's preparing to do that, he's walking through the hallway and he just by coincidence happens to run into Anne and Russ.
Yeah.
And sees Anne again for the first time in a while and meets Russ for the first time.
Yes.
And Russ immediately becomes like a whiny, petulant, irritating, jealous loser, and I absolutely hated it.
Yeah, there's a lot to say about them. Let's just blow through this atmosphere thing. It doesn't go well. It goes very poorly.
It does not. Yusuf, like I said, is being held hostage by Otto. Draper shoots Otto and kills him, and then they cart Otto and Curtis's bodies back to like bury them. Well, Curtis is still alive, but they cart the two of them back to like bury them, and on the way there, Curtis bleeds out and dies.
Yep. Game over, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't go well. So Damian Brackett's pretty pissed off. He's mad at Sergeant Draper. He confines him to quarters. We find out Draper still reports the incident to the Weyland science team, causes a whole bunch of shit, and basically the result of this is Brackett declares that until he hears otherwise, he's going to send a message back to Colonial headquarters and find out what the deal is, but unless he hears otherwise from them, no more Marine escorts on survey missions. Dunzo, right?
Correct.
It's a decision that will not come back to bite anybody in the ass.
Absolutely not.
Right. But let's talk. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, let's talk about this quote unquote love triangle, right?
That is what I was about to bring up. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Russ, I think, feeling a little shitty about his station in life, right? He's presented as like a stereotypical blue collar son of a bitch in the audio drama.
And in the book, he is pretty much consistently portrayed as whiny and insecure.
Yeah.
Because pretty much the only time we ever see him, like the first time we see him in the book is when he meets Brackett. And so because that's the first time we ever see Russ in the book, for literally the rest of the book after that, he's just whiny and insecure and petulant about Brackett being there. So that's like really the only characterization the like character of Russ ever gets. And like it got it got grating to me by the end of the first page, and then it's still like the rest of the book after. It drove me fucking crazy, dude.
I'll say it's pretty tolerable in the audio drama. He's like, oh, this is weird that your ex-boyfriend's here. What is he doing here? And then Anne calls him out on it, and she's like, you think I'm carrying on like an intergalactic romance? You think I had any decision making on where he gets sent and stuff like that? And she also kind of lays it out. She's like, honestly, I'm glad he's here. He was my friend for a long time, and I'm glad to have somebody else here that knows me, that I know, and I'm looking forward to catching up with him. But you're my husband, and that's that, right? And Russ kind of is like, yeah, okay, you're right. I'm being kind of stupid, and sort of puts it away.
Like,
there's a couple maybe moments.
Well, that's the gist of also what happens in the book, but like you said, he's like, yeah, and then he sort of like puts it away. Emphasis on sort of, because like 2 paragraphs later, Anne's narration makes it clear that she can still feel some kind of hostility and jealousness emanating from him, and I'm like, bro, you gotta fucking get over this, man.
Yeah,
bro.
I do it. It's definitely more limited. It's still there, but it's definitely more limited in the audio drama, right? It's not like they get through it pretty quick, and then there's just like some interactions between Demian and Anne, and Demian being like, look, I'm happy for you. It's all I wanted was for you to be happy, etc. I'm not going to try to disrupt your shit. You know, you got great kids, etc. Right?
And during this conversation, he's like, I wasn't even sent here by choice, so it's not even my fault I'm here. You can't say that I'm here because I'm like still attracted to you or whatever.
Right.
I know you're married, your kids are great, your husband is great. And Anne's like, yes, I do have all of those things and I love all of them. But the way like their interaction it's written, like it's clear that there's still something there on like both of the ends,
Yeah, and I think he even acknowledges it. Like he says, like he's like, I can't say that I don't still feel something, but I'm not going to do anything. Yeah, whatever. I mean, it's weird. I think it's a part of something, because there's also this conflict between him and Sergeant Draper, right? And then there's these relationship things with Anne and Russ and Sergeant Draper, and there's these. There's these side characters. There's all of these like little plots set up. There's the scientists who are like mad at Demian Brackett, and they're trying to think of a way to get him onto their side. There's all of these little plot threads that just kind of get dropped because aliens start showing up, right?
Yeah, most of the little minor plot threads don't go anywhere because like 80% of the people involved in them get murdered by a xenomorph before the plot gets resolved.
It's interesting.
Like how you mentioned the love triangle, there's like a power play as well, because like how you mentioned that like Draper was kind of the lead before Brackett showed up. And so like Draper has this like little cadre of Marines that only ever really follow what he says and don't do what the CO says. And so like Brackett and Draper are button heads, and Brackett and like Stamovich, for instance, who's one of the cronies, are button heads throughout the book. And then it becomes irrelevant, like, 2/3 of the way through the book, because like all of them have gotten killed by an alien. So it just didn't go anywhere. We didn't need any of that because it doesn't do anything at the end of the day.
Well, I think what the attempt was, and I do think it was fairly successful in the audio drama, is it was attempting to like tell a story. Okay, so this happens in Alien also, right? And to some some degree, it happens in Prometheus too, where there are these interpersonal things, and everything just like gets disrupted. But what it really reminds me of is Friday the 13th, Part 1, right? The original.
All right.
Or Halloween. I think it happens in Halloween also, and weirdly, it happens in Alien versus Predator Requiem, right?
All right.
Where it's just a story about people living in a place. There's relationship drama. There's conversations. There's just like slice of life stuff, and all of that stuff then just sort of collides with this like horrific event,
All right, that's fair.
Because like Friday the 13th, there's a love triangle between Kevin Bacon and the girl he's with, and is it Teddy, I think, is the guy?
Like the head of the
No.
counselors or whatever?
No, but there's also that. There's also Mr. Christie, and it's not, I want to say Annie, but it's not Annie. Alice. I remembered after I take a drink of the Monster Energy, guys. That's what happens.
Nice. Nice.
And like, there's this hint that they're in a relationship, but she might have to leave early because she's got to go back to take care of some stuff in California. And then all of that shit just like is done because people start getting murdered by, Mrs. Voorhees, right?
For sure.
I like it. It's pretty effective because it's like you start getting invested in these characters, right? And you get invested in what's going on with their lives and the kinds of people they are and the relationships and that kind of stuff. And then boom, everything takes a left turn. I think it's a cool trick that stuff like this plays. I think that this being a novel that ties into the beginning events of Aliens sort of telegraphs all of that stuff. But I do still think it's an effective way to build interest in the characters, right? By creating interesting events surrounding them that you want to know more about, whether you're going to get those answers or not. That's going to make you kind of feel the dread a little bit more when they start dying, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just a thing I noticed. There was a lot of effort put into developing the relationships and the characters and stuff. I felt, and I think that made the ending pretty effective.
In a similar vein, speaking of just like expanding stuff out and just like, the book taking some time to just like have you live in the world with the characters.
Yeah.
At around this part, there's a little, it's maybe like, I don't know, 2 paragraphs. It's not that long. It's just a brief little aside in the book that I thought was really charming and I really liked. Yeah. Brackett just, takes several seconds to just go on about how toasters are still a thing.
That was not in the audio drama. I would have loved to hear that.
He's in his like quarters.
That's incredible.
He's in his quarters because it's the moment where he's like about to go to sleep, and then there's a knock on the door, and like I don't remember who, Coughlin maybe, found Newt just like wandering around and brought Newt to him. Earlier on in that scene when he was just in his quarters by himself, he just like, he's coming in with his bag to like investigate and check his quarters to see what he has. Right. And he's just like doing a tally of like, bed, shower, toilet, working fridge, all these other things. And then he notices that there's a toaster, and he goes, he kind of goes on this thing where he's like, it's wild to me about how a toaster, even after all this time, is still just like a toaster.
Right.
It doesn't do anything else. It just makes toast. It's one of those things where they don't need to gussy it up with all this weird technology or have it do any of this stuff. It's the machine that is perfectly designed for this one function, and it did it so perfectly when they first designed it, they don't need to iterate it on it anymore. And I just thought that was a really fun little aside where he's like, fun. Toasters.
Man, fucking toasters, right? We nailed it with the toaster.
And I just, like I said, it was like 2 paragraphs in the book. It was just a couple of seconds of an aside that really made me laugh. And I was like, yeah, man, toasters.
Nice. Who we haven't talked about at all, speaking of, is Newt.
We sure haven't.
Rebecca Jordan, right?
So far in this book, she's done a lot of goofing off and running around and playing, what's it called? Monster Maze? Is that the name of the game?
She plays Monster Maze with Tim and Louisa and Aaron, right? Those are the other children. Tim, her brother, of course, right? Yeah,
Louisa is her friend. Aaron is more Tim's friend, but it's kind of the 3 or 4 of them just kind of running around,
And they play Monster Maze in the ducts,
And what that means is, I guess they play tag, but like inside the ventilation system, and they crawl around after each other.
And they've got a little clubhouse hidden away in there, which presumably is the room where Ripley catches up to Newt in the movie. That was the
I should say at this point, it is not presumably in the novel. It is made explicit. That's what the clubhouse is.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
I dig it. But yeah, Newt's just kind of banging around doing Newt stuff, right?
Yep. She's eating a lot of freeze pops.
Yeah, loves freeze pops. She's made friends
Loves those
with
freeze pops.
Demi and Brackett. He's walking her back. She's got her doll. Why am I not remembering the doll's name?
Casey.
Casey. She's got Casey. I'm staring at a list of voice cast for this, so there's too many names in front of me. She got Casey. Casey still got her body, right? That's important.
Mm-hmm. At the very end of the book, she mentions that the head is starting to fray from the body,
Right.
but up to this point, it's still whole, yes.
Yeah, and she's like kind of intuitive. Like she can tell that something's going on between her mom and dad. There's like friction between them, right? Static electricity that's repelling them, she says.
She also is really good friends immediately with Brackett.
Yeah.
And doesn't get why Brackett being around causes that static electricity you mentioned earlier. And I was like, oh, honey.
Yeah. Also, she kind of likes Dr. Hidalgo, right? One of the Wayland scientists.
She certainly does. And that's another thing that I was going to mention earlier when talking about the extremely clumsy and obvious foreshadowing.
Right.
Every single character in this book that turns out to be evil, every single other character immediately registers them as evil from the moment they're seen. And every single character that turns out to not be evil is liked by everyone.
Right.
So like there's the three scientists, Maury, Reese, and Hidalgo.
Yeah.
Hidalgo turns out to be a good guy and help the Marines at the end of the book. And Hidalgo, everyone loves her, but Maury and Reese, everyone hates them.
Sure.
And they're the two scientists that turn out to be bad. Or like when Ripley meets Burke, Burke walks into her hospital room and Ripley's immediately like, oh, I fucking hate this guy.
This company man, this motherfucking corporate asshole. And
it's like, every single thing is like that. Like, you know, the moment we meet Draper, who turns out to be I would argue is a minor antagonist throughout the book.
Yeah.
The first time we see him, he's being a dick to a civilian.
Okay.
And it's like every single character who you would qualify as a bad guy, like everyone hates him the moment they meet them. And it's just really obvious, like, clumsy foreshadowing that keeps happening over and over and over again every time a new person pops up. Like it's like someone new that we haven't seen so far in the book will appear, and an established character will see that person for the first time and then make an immediate snap judgment as to whether they like or don't like that person. But that snap judgment is always 100% correct.
Yes.
Like if say Brackett likes this person, that person will end up being a good guy by the end of the book. If Brackett doesn't like them, they always end up being a villain every time. I'm like, bro.
Who is Brackett's kind of second in command? Is that Lieutenant Paris?
Paris, yeah.
Yeah, she's kind of a suck up. She's kind of a narc, right? She's the one who's like, watch out for him and watch out for Draper and like
that was her and Coughlin were the two that were doing that. Yes.
Right. It was more so Paris in the audio drama. Coughlin was there also. He established himself as one of the good Marines, but like Paris was like his Demian's right hand.
Yeah, pretty much. Paris was the second in command. Yeah. Like I don't know if she actually was, but she's like the informal second in command, like the one Brackett always goes to whenever he needs something done or whatever.
Yeah. Now, Kenny, I'm going to disrupt things here for just a second and mention that we've been going, this obviously will be edited. There's some stuff at the beginning and will be trimmed. We've been going for about an hour and 15 maybe at this point.
All right.
We got to get to the fucking alien stuff, right? We have to get to the alien stuff.
Yeah, like we've been going for a little over an hour and we're only at roughly the halfway point of the book right now.
Which is about when the alien stuff starts to happen, right? So
just like in Alien and in Aliens, the first Xenomorph shows up about halfway through the story and it's a face hugger.
That's right. So we all know the story, right? We know that Carter Burke sends an order to Hadley's Hope to have a specific set of coordinates checked out.
Also, as a very brief side note, there's a line here in the book that I really liked.
Yes.
When characters were talking about how Carter Burke sends the message, I don't remember who it is that says it, but it's during a scene where Maury and Reese are talking about how they just received the message from Carter Burke.
Yes.
I think it's Maury. Maury's like, yeah, we just got word from the company, from Carter Burke. And then there's a beat, and then he goes, whoever the hell that is. Which I just thought it funny because, like, you know, we know who Carter Burke is and we know how big of a deal he is as far as like in the narrative of the franchise arc. But yeah, these guys are like, they wouldn't fucking know who that is. And they even acknowledge that in the book. They're like,
Nice.
whoever this Carter Burke character is, I don't fucking know.
Speaking,
And I just thought that was a nice thing to toss in. Like, I wouldn't have thought to say that. And so the fact that Christopher Golden did have the character acknowledge that even though we know who that is, they don't. I just thought that was a nice little touch is all.
that is a nice touch. Speaking of who the hell is that guy, I just randomly clicked on a link on the Xenopedia page about the audio drama. About how when, this is way early on, this is just a really quick brief aside here, way early on when the salvage team picks up Ripley's shuttle, the Narcissus, right? And they're checking out inside it. They find a patch that says Hooper. Do you know who Hooper is?
Wasn't Hooper the main character from Out of the Shadows?
100% it was. When he put Ripley back in the shuttle, apparently he dropped a patch from the Marion that says Hooper on it. So there was another reference to Out of the Shadows that I think is only in the audio drama.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure that wasn't in the original novel. I don't remember hearing that at all.
Yeah, I totally forgot who. I listened to it and I was like, Hooper, who the hell is, I don't know what that means.
Yeah, the reason I remember that is because I thought it was weird that they, like, because his nickname in that book was Hoop. And
Right.
so it got really annoying to me when everyone was just constantly going, hey, Hoop, check it out, Hoop. Hey, Hoop, over here. And I just got real tired of hearing the word Hoop over and over and over
Did
again.
it make you want to shoot some hoops?
It,
Ayo.
no,
Okay.
it did not, unfortunately.
All right. That was a joke about gunning down a fictional character.
Which is what I had a feeling, like, you know, at this point, I didn't know how the book ended, but I had a feeling he was probably going to die. So I didn't feel I needed to kill him because he was probably going to end up dead anyway.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And he did, as we all know.
It's assumed he did.
Rest in peace, Hooper. Floating out there in space, I think. On a
But
escape
yeah,
pod.
anyway, Carter Burke sends in this message.
Yes.
And the message is, Neal, what is it?
Go check these coordinates out in the Ilium Plateau, right? That's a part of the geography. Do you have the exact text of the message by any chance? I don't.
I do not, because it's not in the novel.
Okay. It is in the audio drama, but I can't pull it. But yeah, he wants a specific spot in what they call the Ilium Plateau checked out. And the scientists, the Wayland scientists are just kind of like, you know what? I think Maury wants to go check it out, and Reese is like, come on, we can't check it out. You want to do that without a Marine escort? That's nuts. Let's send some wildcatters out there first. And then when they report back, we can go check it out after that, right? Is that how that played in the book?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. Here's, I think, a missed opportunity. Because they had already stated, Dr. Reese already was trying to figure out how they can get Brackett to cooperate, right? And they were theorizing, like, we need to figure out what makes him tick, right? What's something he cares about and use that against him, right?
Yeah.
So this is like the perfect opportunity for them to be like, you know, he seems to have a relationship with Anne and her children. Maybe we should specifically send Russ and Anne out on this, because then he will be worried about the fact that they're going out to check this out without a Marine escort, and he might insist on helping after that, right? Like, let's target his weakness like we said we were going to. But in the audio drama, they're just kind of like, I don't know, give it to one of the survey teams. Who cares?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. They're just like, yeah, we need someone to go do it. And like, they kind of have an implication a little bit later. Like, they kind of imply that Russ was hired to do it because he's like, one of the crazier ones, and
Sure.
like of all the wildcatters, he's one of the ones on like the higher end of willing to take risks.
Yeah,
And so I'm assuming they hired them to do it because they were the ones that, like, they're the most risk-taking ones that are still alive, I'm
Yeah.
guessing, but they never really go into that at all in the book. So
Russ also loves endangering his children on these survey missions
he sure does, baby.
because not a lot of pushback from Anne. When he brings this news back, they decide that if the weather's good enough, they're all going together.
Not only do they decide that they're all going together because the weather's nice, but like it was originally just going to be Anne and Russ going. And then the kid said, "Hey, can we go?" And Anne initially says no, but then changes her mind for a very specific reason. And that reason is she realizes that if she's going to be stuck in a crawler for several days with only Russ, he'll probably bring up the bullshit about bracket again.
That was
And
missing. That's funny.
And she doesn't want to get into another argument while they're stuck all there out by themselves. But
Right.
she rationalizes, hey, if we bring the kids along, he'll be less likely to bring it up. Sure, kids, come on with us.
There you go. So, we all know what happens next, right? They go out in the crawler, they find the derelict, and Russ and Annie go check it out. The version of this we've seen prior to this in Newt's Tale or in Aliens Special Edition then picks up with Newt and Timmy, on the crawler, and Anne, ripping the door open, and we see Russ with the face hugger, right?
Yep.
This digs in a little more. It's interesting. We actually see them. Oh, I guess we also saw them make their excursion into the derelict in Newt's nightmares in Outbreak, right?
Briefly, yeah.
But we get some more detail of it here. There's not a whole lot to say. I mean, it plays out the way you think. They go in, they see the space jockey, they make some audio recordings about what he looks like. They do find a dead xenomorph.
They find a few dead xenomorphs, and they find a few dead engineers as well.
Oh, that's an expansion. In the audio drama, we just see the pilot engineer, and we see one dead xenomorph from what I remember.
They find in the novel, they find a xenomorph corpse. That's the first one they find is a xeno.
Yep.
And there doesn't seem to be any indication of what killed it. And so I assumed maybe it just, like in Fire and Stone, just got beaten to death by an engineer, maybe.
Probably.
They find a pile of, I believe they say 3 dead xenomorphs, one of which got ripped in half.
Oh, did it get Evil Deaded, or did it get xenomorphed?
It just got like horizontally across the waist.
So it got xenomorphed. Gotcha.
Correct.
It got bishop. We should call that. It got bishoped. That's what we should call it.
And then they also find another thing that I thought was an extremely weird addition.
Okay.
They find a xenomorph and an engineer, like both dead, but like they were clearly in combat with each other, and like they killed each other, and then the bodies just fell where they died.
That's fun.
But the xenomorph is a queen.
Ah, okay.
Which I thought was strange. In my notes I wrote, they find a queen? I mean, sure, why the hell not? But question mark.
That's interesting. All right.
Yeah, it was a weird choice.
Okay, but we do learn that an engineer can go toe to toe with a queen, and just won't really survive, right?
That's true.
Still take a queen down.
And also, one other thing, as a brief side note, I noticed is this book makes the same mistake that Infestation made, where the room with the space jockey in it, like, the big one that's like dead, and the room with all of the eggs is compressed into the same room, when in the movie they're 2 different rooms.
Yes.
But both Infestation and this book compress them into one room.
Here's some news. In the audio drama, they are in fact 2 separate rooms.
So I guess that's just a plot hole that they caught and corrected for the drama then. I gotcha.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Anne in this situation a little bit, because she starts off this, getting out of the wildcatter, out of the, whatever it's called. I know we've talked about this before.
Crawler.
getting out of the crawler to check out the derelict, and she's like, let's just check it out real quick and get back. I don't want to leave the kids behind so long. We're only going to be out here for half an hour. Once they get inside the derelict and she starts seeing all this stuff, she's like, you fuck it. The kids are going to be fine. We got to get down into wherever the cargo would be stored, because if anything is of value, it'll be in there, and we want to make sure we get our claim to it. Like, she switches immediately.
Yeah, they initially say it's going to be a half an hour, and then they give themselves an additional 5 minutes. Then they give themselves an additional 10 minutes. Then they give themselves another half hour. Yeah. Then they're in there for 2 hours. And it's like, the implication that I got is that when we cut back to Newt and Tim later, they've been in there like most of the day.
Yeah. Yes, it's been a while. They go down into the egg chamber and
and they go down there, they wander around for a while, and then we actually see the face hugger latch onto him.
Yeah, it's really funny because Anne like touches an egg and it opens, and Russ is like, don't touch it. And she's like, it's fine. It wouldn't eat through my glove. And it opens, and he's like, let's just close it back up. And he goes to like close the egg back up, and that's when the thing leaps out on him.
I may be wrong about this. Like,
so
this might be incorrect information that I'm just inventing in my head, but I seem to recall that it happens a slightly bit differently in the book. In the novel, I think it's Anne approaches it and like starts to see it shift and move. And he's like, don't touch it. And she's like, oh, if it's toxic, it won't get through the gloves. It's fine. And then she reaches out to touch it, and then it opens up. And then Russ goes, Anne, watch out, and pulls her away. And then when he does, the facehugger jumps out and latches onto him rather than her. I think that's how it happens in the book, but I'm not sure.
That's so basically the same. He doesn't go like, let's just close it back up. I just, in my head, I'm just imagining him like trying to like squish those flaps back together. Jesus Christ. Boom. Dude is face hugged, right?
And then it cuts back to the colony, and we see separate scenes of both. Well, it cuts back to the colony. Well, it cuts back to the crawler is the word I meant to say. Right. And then Newt's kind of, metaphorically stomping around, wondering where Anne and Russ is. And then it cuts back to the colony, and Brackett's basically doing the same thing.
Right, because he got word that they're out on this thing, and they took the kids, and he's like, come on, call in. And then, Anne gets back, calls in, we have a situation, we need help, et cetera, et cetera. Brackett.
Also, as a brief little interjection, this is the point that I referenced earlier where I said that later on in the book, Brackett mentions that he had a fling with a different pilot, so I guess he has a thing for pilots. That's mentioned in this scene, and that pilot's name was Tyra.
Tyra Banks. Yeah. All right.
That's who I assumed, yes.
So Brackett mounts a rescue mission, and they go out with the heavy crawler. They get Russ and Annie loaded up, and then he drives the Jordan's crawler back with Newt and Tim in tow, because Newt's like, you can drive us. I don't want the other Marine to drive us.
Yeah, he wasn't going to. He assigned someone else to do it, but then Newt's like, no, you have to do it. And he goes, okay, fine.
Now Russ has a face hugger on him, and he is in the infirmary, right? Or he gets taken like right to the science division. I'm not 100% sure. I think it's the infirmary. And
he gets taken to the infirmary because Comiskey is there. So he's just at the regular infirmary.
Right. And from here, Newt's tale happens, right?
Correct, yes.
We see the scene of Newt and Tim like getting word that Dad woke up, and they crawl through the vents to the spy on the infirmary as Russ is sort of in there talking about how that thing had its tongue down his throat, and the only person who's allowed to do that is Anne, right?
Yep, that is in the book, baby.
That is in the audio drama as well. Hell yeah. Get it, Russ, right?
That's right. Unfortunately, he does get it when he fucking dies.
Chest burster. Right.
And unfortunately, unlike in Newt's tale, we don't see his tongue wagging out in an extremely hilarious drawing of him being like,
I know, it's unfortunate. I still saw it in my head.
Yeah, when this happened in the book, I pictured that and I went,
yeah, what else are you going to picture, right?
Yeah, I mean
Um,
that is the canonical depiction of it as far as I'm concerned.
Same here. The chestburster, the infant, as they call it repeatedly, escapes
Mhm.
into the vents, and we get this interesting scene where Newt and her friends and Tim and I think Aaron and Louisa are there. I know Aaron is for sure.
Aaron is, Louisa is not.
Okay. They're in the vents with this little baby xenomorph, and I'm going to be real, it wasn't a very effective scene in the audio drama. Like,
Well, here's the thing. It wasn't really a scene in
okay,
the novel because the thing climbs away and everyone
right.
kind of assumes it's in the vents. And then there's a brief shot of Newt going, "Oh no, it might be in the vents with us." And then she looks around and then other stuff happens and it just never comes up again.
Okay. But it seemed like they were trying to go for a scare thing because they're like also immediately in this scene when the kids are in the vents in the audio drama, they find a shedded skin already, right?
That does not happen in the novel.
Okay. Well, they immediately find like the thing like got birthed and immediately started growing.
I don't think there is shedded skin at all anywhere in the novel. I don't think that ever happens at any point in the book.
Okay.
Like I don't think they ever find one at any point.
Right. Okay.
But anyway,
So from here, chaos is just kind of breaking out, right?
at this point, a whole bunch of other people also with
Yes.
face huggers have been brought in. I think they say there's like 12 or 15 of them total or something like that.
Yeah, I want to say it was 15 total. Might have been 14 because at some point there's 9 people with face huggers and there's 5 of these things running around.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Doesn't really matter. But yeah, basically a team went in to check the derelict out after the Jordans got back, and all of them came back with face huggers on them, or a
Yep,
whole bunch of
pretty
them
much.
fucking did.
And so, go ahead.
Well, now it's just like, a lot of Anne crying over losing Russ, and, Brackett and people trying to hunt these things down and figure out what's going on, and the Wayland scientists experimenting on the victims, right?
Yeah, there's an implication that because at one point Coughlin, who in the audiobook is
Yes.
called Coughlin,
Okay.
even though it's spelled Coughlin. So my mind that would be Coughlin,
Right.
but the guy pronounces it Coughlin like it has a K in it. But whatever. Coughlin is assigned to the med bay with the
Right.
idea of anytime a facehugger comes off of somebody, it's his job to kill the person before the chest burster comes out.
Yeah, it's pretty grim.
And on his way there, he happens to see inside of a lab door that's closing, and he
Yes.
sees that they have a living face hugger in
Right.
like an experiment jar. And he's like, "How the hell did you get that?" And the lab assistant's like, "You don't need to know." And
Right.
I guess the implication is that they did manage to surgically remove it from somebody, but of course that person died in the process. I guess
Right.
that's how they got it.
And we see
Like
that
it's never said, but I assume that's how they got it.
they talk about that. Bishop mentions that when they find the lab in Aliens, also that they have 2 of them alive. Those are the 2 that get released on Newt and Ripley when they're sleeping.
Yeah.
And he says that they died taking them off. The patients died taking them off. And in this, Dr. Comiskey, who is the colony doctor, right?
Yes.
She mentions also that they've taken, I think it's her, mentions that they've taken a couple of them off, and it's taken the face of the patients with it.
Yeah,
Which
it's
is
kind of
fucked up.
like it attaches and like peels it off like Velcro. Yeah.
Right. And we do see later they're operating on one of the Marines who has a face hugger. I'm not sure which one. And they're using liquid nitrogen to try to freeze the face hugger digits and
yep.
remove them without spilling acid. And I
And then
don't think it's very,
it doesn't go well.
no, it doesn't go well. Because I believe it finishes implanting, or is it just that when they get interrupted by an adult fucking xenomorph in the room with them?
This is the one where they liquid nitrogenize the legs and
Right.
snap them off, and then it
Yes.
starts to work. And they're like, "Hey,
Oh,
it starts to
thaws.
work." but then it suddenly thaws and starts
Yes.
bleeding everywhere, and then the person's entire head gets fucking melted by acid.
That's what it is. Yeah. How can I forget that? I
Um,
remember
but
now.
there is another scene here that we missed that, I mean, maybe it's in a different place in the audio drama, or maybe it wasn't in there or got compressed with something else.
Mhm.
But there's a scene where Brackett and a handful of Marines and volunteers get sent out to go find the chest burster that's just
Yes.
like loose in the building.
Right.
And there's this guy named Blue Jay there with them.
Okay.
And Blue Jay is a guy that was not in the book up until now and does not survive this scene. So I don't know what the guy's deal is, but they're going around, and there's this weird gag of like they're going around through like, you know, the rooms and the office buildings and the bathrooms and stuff to find this thing.
Yes.
And then Blue Jay like disappears and everyone gets worried for a minute, and then there's a toilet flushing sound and Blue Jay comes out of one of the stalls. And I
Okay.
was like, did you seriously just do this
Wow.
gag in this book?
Holy shit. That was not in the... Yeah.
They track the chest burster to the laundry room,
Okay.
and it attacks them in the laundry room, and R.I.P. Blue Jay.
Sure.
But the reason I bring this up is because the alien is described as being large dog or chimp sized.
Okay, so it's not fully grown. That's fast. That's not a thing we usually see.
And that's the reason I brought it up, because I think this is the first time it's ever explicitly depicted a xenomorph being in like the growth stage between chestburster and drone. I don't
Yeah.
think we've ever actually seen that anywhere.
That's like runner sized, right?
Something like that.
It's
Yeah.
interesting.
And so like I thought that was interesting, but like we never get a description. It's just described as like, you know, the darkness shift and then the alien comes out and attacks, but we never get like a description of really what it looks like. So I honestly just kind of pictured it as like sort of like a runner, where it's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's like dog size, but it's still like it's moving around on all fours, but it can be on its back legs if it want to, but it's only like, you know, still smaller than a human. Like they never really go into what it looks
Sure.
like. So I just kind of made a lot of assumptions, but the fact that they did depict that at all was something I found interesting, because I don't think they've ever really done that before.
I can't think of a time that they have either, you know. It's kind of like, sounds like it's kind of like deacon sized almost.
Yeah, something like that, probably. Like I said, the specific description was, quote, large dog or chimp sized is how
Okay.
they phrased it.
Interesting.
But then after that, there's a scene where Brackett just is continuing on with the hunt with everyone.
Right.
And they end up in the room below the greenhouse.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of the conversation we had in one of our Alien episodes where the scene where Brett gets killed.
Uh-huh.
They're just in that room where there's hanging chains and dripping water. And you were like, what the hell even is this room?
Right.
And it felt like this scene in the book took place in effectively that same room, because the room is described as looking very similar. It's kind of dank. There's water dripping around.
Okay.
And so I was like, oh, it's the same room that Brett got killed in, pretty much. Got it.
Nice. So maybe that was under a greenhouse also on the Nostromo.
Could be.
I like the idea, honestly. There's like a greenhouse on the Icarus 2 in Sunshine, for instance.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah, it also serves as an for oxygen production, right? Filtering
For
the
sure.
air and stuff. It's a pretty sick idea. In your version, was there a part where I believe it was Coughlin when he was talking to the lab techs, not the lab techs, the scientists, the Weyland-Yutani team?
Yeah.
Maybe it was Brackett, I can't remember, and they're talking about like what's going on, and the scientists are just basically like, yeah, no, we've had like 4 other chest bursters happen, and all of them got away, and we just didn't tell anybody.
That scene does happen, and it actually happens right now.
Okay.
Because that scene where that happens occurs after the room that looks like the room where Brett got killed in, because like after that it cuts back to the med bay,
Sure.
and then they very helpfully the scientists describe to Coughlin what triage is,
Right.
despite Coughlin explicitly saying the sentence, "I know what triage is." They still explain it to him anyway.
Right.
And then they have that conversation and he's like, son of a bitch, bracket, there's more of them. And then while he's on the comms with that, another one starts bursting out. And so he like goes to kill the guy, but then goes over to the door to like open it and call out for help from a Marine stationed outside.
Yes.
And when he doesn't get a response, he turns around and there is a xenomorph literally right there, and it stabs him through the heart with its tail, and R.I.P. Coughlin right then and there.
Yeah, that was rough.
There's also something else weird that happens in this scene, because all three of the scientists, Reese, Maury, and Hidalgo, or as Jeff Harding consistently calls her, Hidalgo. He never pronounces the H on her name, but there's a scene where like the xenomorphs come into the med bay and are killing everyone, and Maury and Reese escape. And there's a moment where Hidalgo starts freaking out and she starts like backing up to go into one of the like testing labs or whatever. And there's a group of xenomorphs that go by, and one of them stops and looks right at her for a few seconds and then runs away. And I don't know why that xenomorph ignored her. Like, it's never followed up on. Like, I thought they were trying to imply like a later plot twist that it turns out she's an android.
Yeah, I kept waiting for that to happen too.
But she's not.
No.
She's definitely a human. And like the explanation we give later on is that like at the beginning of the next chapter, she says that they weren't able to smell her because she was locked in a sterile clean room. And it's like, here's the thing.
Interesting.
She was in a sterile clean room, but I even went back and looked. She didn't enter the clean room until after that xenomorph saw her and decided not to attack her.
Weird.
So I don't know why the xenomorph is just like, hey, that chick's over there. You know what? Never mind. I'm just going to go do something else. Like, they never explain why that happened. And honestly, it kind of bugged me, even though it absolutely doesn't matter.
You reminded me of something. I think the way they might have explained that in the audio drama, the way they explain some of these things of the xenomorphs leaving certain people alone, is that they are really focused on collecting people and taking them back for, hiving up, right? Mm-hmm. There's multiple scenes where the xenomorph is excreting saliva, like it's, resin.
Oh yeah, it xenomorphs barf up resin on a whole bunch of people in this book.
I want to be clear. Okay, I'm notorious on this show. I'm very much I don't need you to show me or tell me everything about all of this stuff, right? Like the less I know, the scarier it is, right? Please don't tell me where the xenomorph comes from, etc. I want to see xenomorphs barfing up resin. I want to see them doing the nesting. I want to see them spitting up all over walls to make the hives. Show me that. That's what I want to see. I don't want to know why it happens. I just want to see it fucking happen. Show me the construction methods of the xenomorph.
See, I always assumed that that's the slime they always find everywhere.
Sure.
It's just resin that hasn't hardened yet.
Yeah.
So it's like they're just barfing up slime all over people. And I'm like, yeah, I want to see more of that. That actually kind of rules.
I want to see this. I want to see them I want a xenomorph ant farm, right? Where we just kind of see them going about their business, making their little nests, right? Making their hives, and just dribbling goo all over suckers. I don't know.
Hell yeah.
Ugh.
But yeah, after that, we cut back to scenes with like Anne and Newt and Tim, because like by this point they're locked up in one of the storage room.
Yeah.
But the point of this scene is that somebody, Lydecker maybe, who's Simpson's like second in command, comes in to say, "We're moving, everybody. Everybody pack your shit and let's go."
Yeah.
And The reason I bring this up is for one reason and one reason alone. I believe this is the first point in the book where Anne remembers that the onager exists,
Okay.
because I believe this is the point where she starts thinking about it. I don't recall it being mentioned in the book before this,
Right.
but I think this is the first time she brings it up. And she's like starting to put her plan together about like finding out where it is. And she starts trying to like, she doesn't ask around. She stops one of the Marines and she's like, hey, tell Brackett I need to talk to him when he's available.
Right.
And they're like, okay, whatever. And she's like, the reason I need to talk to Brackett is because I want him to find the onager so that me and my kids can get away on it. And I was like, yeah, I figured that out. Thanks.
Right. Yeah, we got that. We read Fire and Stone. We know about the onager.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of consequence there's a lot of action, right? There's a lot of Marines chasing xenomorphs. There's a lot of colonists getting moved, I think first to the mess hall and then later to like a storage facility, right?
They get moved from like the movement right now. I don't remember where they're going.
Yeah.
But then after they get there, Anne decides to go to a different place, and a handful of colonists go with her there.
Right.
But that's not like an official colonist movement. She just does that on her own.
Okay. And is that the point where they recreate the scene from Newt's Tale where she asks somebody for a gun and they don't want to give her the gun, and then she says, in any case, doesn't matter if it's here or not, this is a thing to talk about, like this happens now.
Well,
right?
that does happen.
Yeah.
I just don't think that happens until later. Yeah, that doesn't happen until later on in the book, but that does happen at some point.
Well, I will
yes.
say at this point in the audio drama, things are moving at a pretty steady clip. Stuff's happening pretty quickly. Like there's no other huge set pieces. There's Marines looking for xenomorphs. There's Anne and the colonists like trying to survive shit. And then there's the scientists like doing xenomorph shit, right? Like we're kind of at the end of like, you know, we're at the point where all of this stuff is sort of getting quote unquote resolved, right? Because there's just more and more xenomorphs around.
We're probably roughly 75 or so % of the way through the book. Yeah.
But we are 2 hours into this recording, so we should probably need to step on it a little because I got a whole other episode to edit tonight.
Let's see. There is a part here where I don't remember the context of it. I think it's two Marines talking, but how I mentioned earlier about how the extremely obvious and clumsy foreshadowing this book has.
Yes.
There's another moment of it here where somebody says, oh yeah, some xenomorphs came in the night and stole some people away, but since it's the daytime, we don't have to worry about it because they only generally come out at night mostly.
They mostly
and then
come
there's a
at night.
pause, and then somebody else goes, mostly. And I was like, yeah, I fucking got it. I saw aliens. Okay.
Yeah. That's pretty frustrating. I just want to talk about this stuff now that is mirrored in Newt's Tale because action's coming to a head, right? Like
it's starting to, yeah.
And I just think we need to tear through this, honestly.
Well, I'm getting there. I'm working on it.
Okay. I mean, are there any like huge plot things that happen?
I got a question for you.
Sure.
Has the character Bill Andrews shown up in anything else? Because when his name popped up in this book, I went, that sounds kind of familiar. I don't know if he's in anything else or not, though.
Let's find out.
But anyway, while you're looking it up, there is a scene where Paris is given control.
Bill Andrews was a colonist at the Hadley's Hope Colony in Acheron in Aliens Newt's Tale and Alien River of Pain.
He was in Newt's Tale. That's why that name sounded familiar. But yeah, there's a scene where Paris, who's like, you know, the leader of the Marines, like stationed outside where the colonists are.
Right.
We find out that her and Yusuf, who for the point of this anecdote, I should point out, are both women. We find out that both of them think Brackett is a huge fucking hunk, and they think he's super hot, and they like him a lot.
I can tell you that Colin Salmon is for sure.
Unfortunately, some xenomorphs show up, and R.I.P. Chanovsky, Aldo, and Virgil, all three of them get killed.
Damn,
right around this. right around this point is when Brackett leads the remaining Marines into Processor 1, because they finally had the bright idea of trying to pinpoint with a computer
Right.
where the colonists' computer chips are.
Right.
And
The CDPs
so they go
or
down
whatever they're
there.
called.
Yep.
The same way
And
Hudson found them in Aliens, right?
that is correct.
The
yes.
tracking chips.
And a Marine named Howard dies. And then Al Simpson, the mayor of the colony, also gets
Sure.
killed because Simpson and Dr. Hidalgo go with the Marines when they
Right.
go down there.
Yes.
And this is how I mentioned earlier. I was like, were they trying to set up that Hidalgo is like an android? This is how we know she's not, because she gets
Right.
fucking killed by a xenomorph.
Does she, or is she presumed dead at this point?
She gets one of her limbs blown off and then half of her face melted off with acid.
Okay.
It's actually described as he sees like one dot of acid lands on her cheek and then it just starts eating through her entire head. And he describes it as it's like watching someone get shot with the slowest bullet in the universe. And I thought that was a weirdly poetic line to show up in this book.
Wow.
I just really like the idea of a slow bullet.
Sure.
And then the reason that's important is because Hidalgo is one of only 3 people, the other 2 being Maury and Reese,
Right.
that know about a hidden Weyland-Yutani research ship that like is designed for them to flee if something goes wrong with the colony.
Right. So now the scientists are like, we got to get a specimen and we got to get the fuck out of here. We have an escape pod. And it's not just an escape pod. It's like a full ass ship, right?
Oh, it's an actual ship. Yes.
Yeah. They're like, we got to get out. We got to get this thing and boogie.
Maury and Reese are on their way there and they're pissed off because Hidalgo decided to go with the Marines instead. And then as she's dying, she tells the Marines about this like escape vessel.
Right.
And this is important because Draper is also there. And Draper goes, "There's a way off this rock. Deuces, bitches," and then flees. Like goes rogue and goes AWOL and is like, "I'm just going on that ship and flying. Screw all y'all."
Fucking Marvin.
Yeah,
right?
Marvin Draper. That's him. Yep.
Here's a little bit of trivia. It seems highly likely that Sergeant Draper is supposed to be the same man as Drapers, briefly featured in the comic Aliens Newt's Tale. In the comic,
okay.
Drapers
Well,
is seen reporting
yeah.
from within the Xenomorph hive when the group attending the rescue to the captured colonists is ambushed. While Sergeant Draper makes no such radio call in the novel, he is a part of this ill-fated rescue mission. So that's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Drapers was, I remember that.
The other point where I said, you know, how I said that Anne and a handful of colonists are like going to some other place on their own and they're going to lock themselves up in there.
Yeah.
That is referred to in the book as the Op Center.
Okay.
Anne decides to go there with some other colonists. While Reese and Maury, we see some scenes of them going through the now abandoned parts of the colony to get there. And when they arrive, or when Anne gets to the Op Center, that scene you were talking about earlier, this is where that happened.
This is the scene straight out of Newt's Tale where
they
asks,
get to the Op Center. Yeah. Anne asks for a gun, but unlike what happened in Newt's Tale, it is not clear whether she wants the gun for protection or to kill her children.
Oh, it was very explicit in the audio drama that it was like, I can't let what happened. I mean, it's the same language. I can't let what happened to Russ happen to them. I need something. Well, you know,
that's how they phrase it. Like she still has that line in the book, but then there's some like, you know, omniscient third person narration where it says like, you know, Anne wasn't sure whether she meant it for protection or to save her children from the same fate. Like it specifically says she doesn't even know whether that's what she's intending to do with it. And then later on, how in Newt's Tale, like the Xenomorphs break in and she's like, "Well, kids, this is it," and like raises the gun before they notice the vent. That does not happen in the book. She has the gun, but she uses it to shoot a Xenomorph, and then she's the one that notices the vent and goes, "Kids, get in the vents."
Yeah, it seemed pretty like
Yeah,
I
they make
understand.
it a lot. They make it a lot more vague in this
Right.
book than it was in the comic.
That's fair, but it does. It does. It. I still read it the same, or I listened to it. I heard it in the same way of like, I might have to kill. I might have to pull the fog on my family. Right.
It's the mist, but
I
yes.
might have to pull the mist on my family. Right. I
This is
haven't seen either
also
movie. That's staying in. I haven't seen the fog or the
that's fine.
mist.
How you mentioned earlier about that guy Drapers. Well, the main thing that Drapers does in Newt's Tale is he gets back into where the colonists
And he
are, and then when the
brings
doors open, all the xenomorphs come in.
yes,
That same thing happens. Like Draper shows up and he knocks, and then
100%.
when the door opens, he's like, and then falls over dead, and then a bunch of xenomorphs
Whole bunch of
rush in.
xenomorphs run in, and again, just like in Newt's tale, they make a break for the vents. Newt goes first, then Timmy.
Yep.
I don't know why I'm calling him Timmy. It's just Tim. Everyone only calls him Tim. I guess me.
I
And
mean,
we're buddies.
I mean, he's
Me and
called
Timmy
Timmy.
are-
He's called Timmy a couple of times.
Me and Timmy are bros.
But yeah, Timmy goes in and then sees Anne getting attacked, and he goes, "Oh no!" and gets out and picks up a gun and then shoots the xenomorph and then gets his face melted off
then
with
gets
acid.
his face melted off with acid, just like in Newt's tale. So poor Newt
Yep.
has seen her mother and brother die twice in fiction.
Yep.
that we know of.
So we've got since that scene is happening at the same time, Maury and Reese are making their way to the escape ship.
Yes.
And then they get attacked by a xenomorph while they're in there.
Yeah.
I wrote R.I.P. Grunwald, R.I.P. Andrews, R.I.P. Anne, unfortunately. R.I.P. Tim, and then R.I.P. Reese. Died as he lived. A huge fucking asshole.
Yeah, man.
There is also another scene where like a lab assistant comes back and she's all like beaten up and has like a bunch of wounds and stuff. And
This
she
is who I
clearly
was
has a
thinking
chest
of.
burster.
It was the lab assistant. Yeah, that's who I confused with Dr. Hidalgo a few minutes ago. It's the lab assistant who shows up where Reese and Maury are.
The lab assistant's name is Katie, or well, Khadi, as he says in the book, because it's Khati. And
Okay.
Khadi's like wandering around, and Maury and Reese like see her, and then she falls over, and they notice the chest burster's about to come after her.
Right.
And so Reese is like, hold on. And like I was under the impression, because like earlier on in the book, they were talking about the one thing we need is a living xenomorph specimen.
Sure.
And like they see this chest burster coming out, and so I'm like, oh, how are they going to capture this thing? And then Reese pulls out a gun, and when the chest burster starts to come out, he just unloads the gun into her and like kills Khadi and the chest burster. And I was
Yowzers.
like, I thought you were trying to capture this guy, man. What are you doing?
Well, now he's just self-preservation, right? He just wants to survive. It's so fucking weird because they're like, yeah, I don't know, a bunch of these things got loose and we didn't do anything about it or tell anyone. And now he's like, oh, this shit's real, right? Like,
Yep.
I don't want to die.
And then at this point, Brackett and the remaining Marines make it to the op center. He finds Anne's body. He finds Tim's body. He does not find Newt's body, but assumes she's also dead. He does, however, find her friend Louisa, who didn't get killed. She just got resined. And so he scoops her up and takes them along with him.
Yeah, he rescues Louisa. Who I had the impression, I don't know if they explicitly stated, but that Louisa was even younger than Newt. I guess if Newt was the firstborn, she would have to be. Unless it was like another family came to the colony and she was already
with
around.
A child.
With a child, right. Like Anne and Russ did with Tim. But
unfortunately, at this point, both Pettigrew and Yusef both get killed. I believe one of them gets bitten through the chest. And I don't remember what happens to the other one, but both of them end up getting killed.
Yeah, lots of people die in this. It's weird.
And then this is pretty much the end of the book. The final two chapters are the remaining Marines, who are Brackett. Well, Louisa's not a Marine, but Brackett, Louisa, and Paris meet up with Maury. And I think it's just the four of them. But they meet up with Maury, and Maury's like, all right, I'll take you guys with
Right.
me. It's fine. They get in the ship, blast off planet, and then there's this really weird scene where Brackett's like, all right, like he in his mind refers to Paris as Lieutenant Paris, and then he goes, no, she's not a lieutenant, not anymore. And then he gives this big speech about how he's like, the Xenomorphs are these creatures that showed up and tried to kill us all, but they're just monsters. They're just beasts. They're not even evil because they're not smart
Right.
enough to be capable of immoral choices. But Wayland Yutani, they're the head of the snake.
Yes.
And this group, we're going to make it our life's mission to take Wayland Yutani down. And I'm like, bro, I don't know what you're talking about because this is the only book you ever appear in.
He's like, we're gonna restart the Earth Savers, and we're gonna take down Wayland. He doesn't say Earth Savers, but
he basically says we're gonna take the fight to them and take down Wayland. And I'm like, bro, what are you talking about?
Be kind of fun if they had done another story featuring these characters. It would have been kind of interesting. Maybe there were plans,
I would like to see,
you know,
like I would like to see Brackett again. I'll admit I liked him as a character.
I liked Brackett a lot too. You know, he's essentially is the main character of this book also.
Much. I should say though, because we're like 99.6% of the way done. That's not the final chapter of the book. There is one last chapter. It's only a couple of pages.
Before we do that, I do want to add there were a couple things maybe in the audiobook version, not in the novel. I feel like this must have been in the novel. It happened it has already happened at the very least in the audio drama, where Newt, who has been hiding in the vents, witnesses the ship taking off.
That does not happen in the novel.
And she's like, this ship and it's taking off and they've all left me behind. Everyone has left me behind. This really sad moment where she is aware, like we are made aware that she is aware that she has been ditched by this ship, that she will then not mention to anybody in Aliens that this happened.
Yeah, she definitely, that scene never happens in the novel. No,
it does happen in this. And also, did we talk about Reese getting carted off by a xenomorph as he was trying to get on the Wayland Yutani ship and then shot himself because he didn't want to be hived up?
Well, I talked about how Reese died, but I didn't specify how he died. But yes,
I feel like
a xenomorph grabs him and tries to pull him in, and then he pulls out the gun and shoots himself in the head. That's how Reese dies.
I think it's worth talking about every time a Wayland Yutani scientist who's been a real smug dick for the entire whatever it is we've read then ends their own life because they don't want to be eaten by an alien. It happened in Outbreak. It didn't really happen with Carter Burke, but we did see, Carter Burke getting nested up and Ripley giving him a grenade. Like, we've seen these things, right? Mm-hmm. Does she give him a grenade or does she give him a sidearm? I don't remember.
I believe she gives him a grenade. I'm pretty sure it's a grenade.
This stuff's going to happen. It's always fun to talk about. Like, you always feel good when the asshole from Wayland Yutani gets what's coming to him. Anyway, let's continue on.
The final chapter, very little actually happens. Ripley's in her room, and then Burke and Gorman show up and make her an offer she can't refuse. So, of course, she accepts. The group lands and investigates around and sees, like, evidence of, like, huge acid burn holes and everything and so on. And then the final section of the book is only like 2 or 3 paragraphs, and it's Newt in the clubhouse.
Yes.
And she's talking about how sometimes she will still hear echoes of sounds throughout the ventilation that she's pretty sure if she follows those sounds, they'll turn out to be screams.
Wow.
But she hears a sound that she's like, that's not screams. That's people talking.
Right.
Maybe this is something that's like worth having hope for. And that's pretty much how the book ends.
Okay. Yeah. The audio drama ends with the motion tracker scene when the Marines and Ripley come across her. And she is, I think, at first thinking it's the monsters. And then she hears the talking and realizes it's people. And she goes to check it out. But I do want to talk a little bit about some of this Ripley stuff. As I mentioned, when she's in the incident,
the inquiry.
The inquiry, there we go. There was plenty of stuff retconned in to kind of make more sense of like the canon changes, right? The little reference to the Out of the Shadows event, and then somebody casually dropping in. By the way, they call it Acheron now, like when they're talking about LV-426, just stuff like that. But there's a few other scenes on Gateway Station. All the Ripley stuff pretty much happens like it is in the movie. It's not word for word, you know. But
I mean, that's why
stuff.
I pretty much glossed over
Right.
all of it, because it's not really meaningfully different than the events of the movie.
But there is one other scene that doesn't involve Ripley. It involves Burke and Gorman, and Burke and Gorman are meeting prior to going to see Ripley, or maybe after they've met with Ripley.
As far as I know, unless I'm forgetting something, I don't think this scene is in the book.
Okay, I believe it's after they've gone, when they know when they know they're going on the mission to LV-426, and Carter is trying to get access to the ship Synthetic because he wants to make sure that they have someone who can follow Weyland-Yutani orders. And Gorman is like, no, like, you can't have access. You can't replace our synthetic Bishop with another android, and you can't reprogram Bishop. His model won't allow it, and I'm not going to let you replace him because he's part of my team, and my team needs to trust him. So if you want some shady Weyland-Yutani shit done, you got to do it yourself, is basically the gist of the conversation. And it's real.
That for sure does not happen in the book.
Like, it's interesting. Like, it's definitely there to be like, to throw us off. Because, you know, there was some mystery surrounding Bishop as the synthetic in Aliens, right? Coming off of Alien, you know? Obviously, Ripley having mistrust of him. I don't think that this scene adds anything, right? Except that it gives an explanation as to why Bishop wasn't like Ash, which was unnecessary.
I got you. Yeah.
But I guess it's like, we need to know why Weyland-Yutani didn't try to do the same thing again with the other synthetic.
Yeah.
So that sort of does like make sense, but it was needless. It didn't really need to be there. And then it also created this weird situation where now Gorman knows there's some weird shit going on with Burke, and he's just fine with it.
And he still lets him come anyway.
He still lets him come. He still lets him have power and interact with people. And it makes it seem like it makes it seem like Gorman is sort of in on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's in on the Weyland-Yutani plan. And it just, I don't know. I just didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that scene's not in the book, so this is the first I've heard of it. But yeah, it doesn't really seem like it like adds anything or really needs to be there.
Right.
So,
but it was, you know, and it was an addition. And as I said, William Hope returned to voice Gorman, and that was pretty cool. Lieutenant Scott Gorman, full name. And this isn't the last time that they're going to get cast members from the movies to reprise roles in the audio dramas, as we will find out when we eventually cover the audio drama version of William Gibson's Alien 3 script starring Lance Henriksen and Michael Biehn. But that's it for River of Pain. I don't know. It was fine. It just did a lot of unnecessary stuff that we didn't need, that with just I feel like a few little adjustments, like this could have sat in canon still. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Without these weird conflicts with aliens, right? Like, it's small things, like make it, you know, a different kind of security force. Boom, done.
Yeah.
You know, the Marine detachment on LV-426 really makes this not work for me, like in terms of cohesive universe storytelling. But I guess it's an easy enough thing to overlook if you're just kind of like, if you don't care about that stuff. Right. But like, I'm becoming the person who cares about that stuff. And I don't know how crazy I am about being that person, but it is happening nonetheless.
Yeah, I will also echo your sentiment that the book is fine with a capital F. It's fine.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cool action scenes. I like it when the Xenomorphs show up and start killing people. That's always fun.
Yeah.
It, in my opinion, it takes too long to really get there. But, you know, again, it holds on to the like classic alien formula of the monster doesn't show up until halfway through the movie. So I suppose it's not that big of a deal. But the characters that you're supposed to like, I liked them. I thought Brackett was a cool character. I liked Paris. I liked Yusuf. I didn't like Stamovich or Draper, who were portrayed to be bad guys. Like, the writing is very broad, and it's one of those things where, like I was hinting at earlier, like every character, when they show up, you're immediately given a yes or no, good or bad description of them, and that description is accurate and, like, the true course of who they are. But, like, the characters that you're supposed to like, I liked them. They weren't super well written, but I thought it like did the job as far as me like getting to understand these characters and knowing their deal and knowing what they're like. And it's like I would like to see Brackett again. I thought he was a pretty cool character.
Yeah, I liked Brackett a lot. He was a stand-up guy,
Yeah. He was a good Marine, as a lot of people say in the book.
And as he said repeatedly as well, that he's a good Marine, he follows his orders, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. There is one or two little brief, just like, stray thoughts I wanted to mention.
Yeah, let's hear it.
There's two separate points in this book where somebody talks about two people arguing as it being a dick measuring contest. And it's weird that pops up twice in this book, because that's actually a sentence I've never heard anyone say sincerely in real life, but it shows up twice in this book alone.
I have had friends use it sincerely.
I definitely
probably have also, but I was, like to be fair, it was literally a dick measure. No, it wasn't.
Hey, if it was, do you, dog. It's fine.
Well, sometimes you gotta measure dicks.
Sometimes you do, man. Sometimes there's no other way to settle a dispute.
Yeah, it'll settle a dispute real quick. What else you got?
The other thing I wanted to mention is when Brackett and the remains of his crew go into the op center, which that's where like Anne and Tim and all of them died.
Yes.
They were in the process of welding the door shut when the xenomorphs broke in.
Damn.
And so there is a scene where when Brackett and his men show up, one of the doors is closed and the other one is open, but they don't know that that closed door is closed because it's welded shut. So it's Brackett and Yusuf were gonna barge through the door, but since one of them is welded shut, there's a scene where like Brackett throws the door open and goes in, and Yusuf's like, all right, I'm going in, and she charges towards the other door and just runs face first into it because she doesn't know it's welded shut.
That's
and
so
I was
funny.
like, another like that gag with that Blue Jay guy in the bathroom, just another weird gag they toss into this book for no reason at all. But
Nice.
that one actually really made me laugh.
Christopher Golden was having some fun with these bits. Those things didn't get translated into the audio drama, unfortunately.
Also at the very end, Brackett, he makes the decision that when Louisa wakes up, he's gonna like tell her what happened.
Sure.
And he's even like, like, I understand that she's going to be haunted by it. Who knows? I can't even say for sure if she's ever going to get over it. But the conversation that he has like with himself about whether to tell her or not is like a callback to earlier on when he was talking about like, how he didn't want to break up with Anne, but he had to, because he's like, sometimes like, when, I was taught that sometimes there is no right answer. No matter which choice you make, someone's going to get hurt. So the right choice is the one with honor. And so at the very end of the book, he calls back to that comment because he's like, it's like the right honorable thing to do, to be honest with Louisa and make sure she understands what actually happened here.
Sure.
And like, I just thought that was a nice bit of writing where he like called back to a conversation that did not mean anything and most of the readers probably don't remember, but I thought it worked as a nice little callback because like I said, Brackett's a pretty well written character, and so that's the kind of thing that he would remember and the kind of decision he would make. And so I just thought that was another piece of evidence of like how this character was pretty well written,
I think so too. Also, it's clear he's trying to radicalize Louisa he's trying to hit girl her, right?
That is correct.
To fight against Wayland Yutani. He's going to turn it into a game and
That's right. That's right.
He's going to,
I don't think I had anything else I really wanted to say.
Okay.
Like I said, the last like 150 pages when the Xenomorphs show up and just start ripping people in half. And there's a
Yes.
point where like multiple chapters in a row, like 6 named characters get killed in every chapter.
Right.
And that part of the book was fucking sweet. My big problem is that it just took like half the book to get there, you know?
Yeah. I think
Because like I said, the audiobook is 10 hours long.
Sure.
I had to spend like over half of a shift at work of just like listening to relationship drama until a Xenomorph showed up. And so I would have liked for it to get to it a little quicker, you know, but
yeah, the
Yeah.
audio drama is almost 5 hours long, and I listened to it twice. So about the same.
The audiobook is just barely over 10. It's like
Okay.
10 hours and like 1 minute and 16 seconds or something
Right.
like that.
That's about the same, I suppose. Yeah, I enjoyed listening to this, right? I've enjoyed listening to it
Yeah.
several times. I may be
sure.
getting a little picky, right, with being bothered by them. But here's another thing, man. Don't they just notice at Hadley's Hope in Aliens that like there's just been like some small arms fire and stuff like that when they get there?
Yeah.
Like I really genuinely think it's a more interesting story if the Marines aren't there. If it's another force that's even less able to deal with this, right?
Mhm.
But like, yeah, when you make it Marines, like it doesn't line up storyline wise, but also it's like, okay, well, we already know that aliens can't handle this, or aliens. We already know that Marines can't handle this, so send more Marines in, and they're also not going to be able to handle this, right?
Yeah,
Like,
for sure.
It's just
Yeah, and plus because since this is explicitly designed as a prequel, i.e., it takes place before the events of the movie, but we already know what happens in the future.
Right.
It's like we already know that second group of, not only do we already know that second group of Marines isn't going, well, I guess they do succeed technically,
Sure.
but we already know a lot of bad stuff is going to happen to them. And we already know, because they're being sent in, that by definition, anyone that was there before was also going to fail.
Right.
So telling us the story of a group of characters that we already know wasn't going to do the job, it's like, why do we even need to know about it then?
Yeah. I can confidently say that I, not even as a joke, I know I make jokes about it all the time. I can confidently say that I prefer the Newt's Tale version of this story more than the River of Pain version.
All right.
I really do. I think it's, I think if they had just fleshed that out with some of the relationship things, and again, not put so much in with the, I don't even think they needed to put the Weyland-Yutani science crew in here and the escape ship, like all of that stuff also bothers me about this, right?
Yeah.
Like I just think it's a better story, being a smaller story, being a story about a complex getting overrun by xenomorphs, being ill prepared to deal with it, and pretty much everybody dying or being captured, with the exception of one young girl who could hide from the monsters. Like that's a much more fascinating story, and that's what Newt's Tale leaves us with, right? This leaves us with a surviving, 2 ships, right? The Onager over on LV-223, right? And then the Weyland-Yutani ship out in space, now apparently going to like wage war against Weyland-Yutani in the far reaches of the frontier. Like,
Sure.
A lot of people got off this planet, right? And
Sure did.
it's, I don't know.
I mean, it's like how, going back to the conversation we were having at the beginning of the episode, it's like how the thing with Star Wars is that Star Wars was like, Yoda and Obi-Wan were the only ones that survived the Jedi Purge.
Right.
And then Clone Wars comes out and it's like, also there's like 14 other Jedi that also survived the Purge, as it turns out.
Yeah. I understand that that's the way things go, and I'm not one to, like, I'm not so mad at this that it like ruins Aliens for me, whatever. Because again, like, there's so much of this stuff, you can just pick and choose what you like and leave the rest of it for whatever,
For sure.
And I still like this, and this won't be the last time I listen to this audio drama, because again, it is just a fun thing, a fun, entertaining thing to listen to, But in terms of like what I'll call my personal canon, I prefer the Newt's Tale version over this one. And I know that Newt's Tale's not canon either, but I don't see any reason why it can't be, right?
I mean, I think the reason Newt's Tale isn't canon is because this book was made and like tells the same story at the same time. So
Right.
it just like supersedes it. But
Yeah.
like, I mean, there's like you said, canon can be whatever it is we want. I mean, you've gone on record before that according to you, 3 and Resurrection probably didn't happen. So
Oh, have I said that? Yeah. Well,
well, you've said it to me. I don't know if you've
you're
ever
right.
said it on the show,
I
but
I've definitely said something along the lines of like when I think of the Alien franchise, that I think of there's select entries that are the ones that I go to, right? And it's Alien, Aliens, Isolation, Outbreak. Honestly, especially after reading it again, like there are certain things that I'll be like, those are the Alien stories that I am invested in and care about. I mean, we'll see when we do Alien 3 that I definitely have some issues with that, as a lot of people do, But
speaking of which, though, there is a reason why we're doing River of Pain now, and that is to bookend the Aliens segment of the timeline. We started with
yes.
Newt's Tale. We're closing with River of Pain. And why are we doing this as a bookend, Neil?
I don't know. Why are we?
The reason we're doing this as a bookend is because we're wrapping up with this
Yes.
issue, or with this episode. We have officially wrapped up the Aliens section of the timeline for
Yes.
now. And with the next episode, we're moving on to Alien 3, baby.
Well, I think next episode we're moving on to Archie versus Predator number 3.
Okay, so the next alien thing we talk about will be Alien 3.
Yes. Our next episode will be Archie versus Predator issue 3. Getting back to that series finally, since we're also going to be starting up a new Alien series from Marvel pretty soon. Isn't that supposed to drop in April? The new series.
I believe it does. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll be cutting those episodes in as we are covering some Alien 3 related stuff. We got a guest lined up. I'm gonna go ahead and call our shot here. My friend Josh from the Combat Time podcast. It's a Mortal Kombat podcast. Last time I was on the show with them, he was asking about Alien 3. He's got some opinions on it as well, and I was like, well, sounds like you got to come on the show to talk about Alien 3. So look forward to that.
So, Archie vs. Predator issue aside, the next Alien thing we'll be covering is the theatrical cut of Alien 3, the film.
Specifically the theatrical cut. And I believe after that, we are going to cover the William Gibson Alien 3 script adaptations. And we're probably, I still think it's a good plan to do them both as one, right? Or do the...
Well, there's actually 3 different versions of the Gibson Alien 3 script, but we can cover all of them on the same episode. Yes.
Right. We're going to cover all the Gibson stuff at once: audio, drama, comic book adaptation, and I think it's just a printed script adaptation. I don't think it's like adapted into like a novel or anything, was it?
It might be a novel, but yeah, there's a comic book, an audio book, and a print version.
Right.
So
yeah, we'll be tackling those after that, and then we got some other stuff on the Alien 3 list, but we'll get to that later.
we managed to find enough stuff in the Alien 3 section of the timeline to get a good handful of episodes out of it. So
yeah, one thing I'm excited about is talking Alien Trilogy for the Sega Saturn, Sony PlayStation, and MS-DOS PC.
Well, since you already mentioned 3 of the 4 things we'll be covering, I should say the Alien 3 month is going to be the movie,
Sure.
The various versions of the Gibson script,
Yes.
Deep Black, which is a
Right.
short story in Aliens Bug Hunt, which is a sequel to 3, and then we'll be covering the trilogy game that Neal just mentioned.
There we go. Also, Kenny, I found a way for you to be able to play that pretty easily if you need to, so
You got it.
we'll talk about that later. But
Yeah, we don't need to talk about that now. It's fine.
for now, I'm ready to go. What about you, Cooler Bot? Are you ready to get out of here?
Please stay hydrated, everyone.
Good advice, Cooler Bot. Kenny, where can people find you on the internet?
I am on most social media sites, but mainly Twitter. My handle is at CYHOBBEZ. Just look around with that handle. Pretty much everywhere that I have an account, you'll find me under that name. It's my brand. I use it for everything.
It's your brand. It's your IP.
It sure is, baby.
You can find me on Twitter at Final Neal and Instagram at Final Neal Retro. And I host a show about Mortal Kombat TV shows and stuff like that. For now, it's called MK Podquest. Find that in your podcast app or at mkpodquest.com. Kenny, where can people find this show outside of our new YouTube channel, which again is www.youtube.com/@crewexpendable?
It sure is. And besides that, we have a website. It is crewexpendable.net. Our Instagram handle is at crewexpendablepod. Our Twitter is at crewexpendapod. And send us an email at mother@crewexpendable.net.
That's right. Next week, we will be talking Archie versus Predator issue 3. So if you haven't heard our episodes on issues 1 and 2, scroll back in your podcast app, give them a listen. It's a fun series.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say it considering we're an alien podcast, but that might be the best stuff we've done so far for the show.
Not in terms of our output, but in terms of things we've discussed. The Archie versus
correct.
Predator comics are
very,
of all
the stuff we've covered, the only thing I might like better than Archie versus Predator is Alien.
I love that that's a maybe. It's not a maybe for me.
Well, here's the thing. There's a chance I might like AVP better just because it is just so much fun. It is insanely wacky in a way that Alien can't reproduce. And so I might like it more just because the specific style of fun that comic gives. I don't know if it has more than the specific style of fun the movie Alien gives. Like, I don't know. I like them both roughly equally, which if you've seen Alien should tell you how good Archie vs. Predator is.
There you go. So stay tuned for that next week. Next episode, I should say. Stay tuned for that next episode. And until then, stay frosty.